All right, let's see. Am I actually live? Hello, hello. Anyone's out there? Rude dude with a tude. That's right. You got it. Adam, I'm on if you're interested. Hey, Lamer. I'm on Discord in the Biddle Discord down in live right now, 0 under the streaming section. If you guys want to voice chat, that will be down. That will be part of the stream as well, if you'd like. Obviously, if you just want to YouTube chat, that's cool too. Whatever you'd like to do. So, yeah, feel free to stop by. Let me know how I sound. All that fun stuff. So, I was sitting here editing video anyway and thought, hey, why not just take the opportunity to stream it? Hey, you know. And also, I'm using Olive, which a lot of people I know don't use Olive or haven't tried it, or maybe did try it and saw it as being a little too bare bones. Or I don't know. I've seen a lot of different things out there. So anyway, I thought I would just take the opportunity to show you how I use it, why I like it, why I keep using it, and so yeah, let's see how this goes. Streaming is not my forte. It never seems to work all that well for me. So we'll see what happens.
Sounds good, by the way.
Oh, cool. Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Waiting to see you in your, what's that word? Workflow?
Oh, yeah. I guess I have one of those. I'm not sure.
Seems to be a bit of a 4-letter word around
is.
certain circles.
It is. That it is. So, let's see. So I'm gonna put it in the chat frame, and if it's too small, just let me know, and I'll just do the desktop and camera one instead. So, all right. So I've got my source files. What I did was on last Saturday morning, I met with Serge and we did a Zoom stream where we took a look at LibreOffice Calc. And what we decided to do was instead of streaming it, we would just do a private meeting. I'd capture the video and then just edit it down into a couple of different videos because we covered filtering, sorting, and conditional formatting. And I know these are things that we've kind of talked about before, but I thought this would be maybe a better way to do this because it seems like what we've had happen is with the streams and just some audio issues and things like that. So what I wanted to do was to just get discrete video for each of those topics and then edit it down into a video and have it be available just in those individual topics so that people can, if they want to know about filtering, they can watch the filtering one, and that's, you know, just a little easier that way. So so I had the raw output. I was using Zoom and then OBS to capture the output, so I just ended up with a fairly large MKV file, which let's see, yeah, 4.2 gigs of just raw video, which I think was, let's see, about
So I'd say the desktop,
yeah.
the desktop is a little small with the chat frame.
Okay, we'll do this now.
All right, sounds good. I just need 1 more minute and we'll be ready to go.
Yes.
Okay, so this is all just the raw video. What I've found in Olive is if you just use the video on the timeline, then what you end up with is so let me just bring this in. If I bring this down onto the timeline, then I'm going to get my video and audio as separate channels, obviously. separate layers, I guess. And what I've found is that Olive does a better job if I pull out the audio first and then bring it back in as a separate audio file. And so what I'll end up doing then is to just go into, get rid of that and that. I'll just go into like Audacity. So I'll open this with, I may not even have Audacity on here. I'm such a noob. Okay, I'll be installing Audacity while I'm talking. So what I normally do is I edit on my laptop and then I move the files once they're edited over onto my desktop. I'm streaming from my desktop, so I don't do all the editing on here, which is why I don't have the apps on here at the moment, but we can rectify that. So I use Audacity.
So are you aware you're only like giving portion of the screen?
Really?
Yeah, I'm only seeing like maybe the top left, like 75% of the from the top left.
It's probably OBS. Let me see real quick.
Oh, it certainly is.
Again, streaming is not my forte. Yeah, let's see. Oh, yeah, that would make sense. So my desktop is slightly larger than. No, it should fit.
Yeah, you can transform and then fit to screen or something like that.
Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. All right, so I should have Audacity now. Yeah. Okay, so I just opened the video file in Audacity. And that'll just bring in the audio portion of the video file. And then I export that as, well, I'll do some audio tuning as well. So the audio for, in this case, Serge's mic, he doesn't sit very close to it. So I add a compressor filter to it that just kind of levels everything out, clips out any high points, and then brings up low parts of the volume, which again, for him, he has a Yeti, but it's just, he's a little too far away from it. So I throw a compressor on here. If I select the audio, and I usually change just a 2.5, and then my threshold, I bring that up to about 24. And then what that'll do is, so the audio is not bad, but it's a little quiet. And what this is going to do is just clip off the high points and then bring up all those mids and lows, and to just make it more of sort of a uniform waveform, for lack of a better word. And it just leads to better audio in general. And it's not like a magic fix. It would be better if he was a little closer to the microphone, but this, at least you see how it changes that, and it essentially just makes it a little louder. So, I mean, if I skip in here,
EPT, EPT.
So you can kind of hear it's a little tinny because he's just far enough away.
And then you can click on.
And with a condenser mic, if you don't get up on it, and if you're not, like, so I'm on a dynamic mic, but I'm only 3-4 inches away. But if you're not close to a condenser mic, your voice will echo around the room. Any kind of sound that's in the background, it just kind of brings all that in. So this compressor helps a little bit there. I could also maybe do something like a background noise removal, but he doesn't have a tremendous amount of background noise. Well, his wife's watching television, but there's really not much you could do about that. So, so now that I have that, I'll go ahead and export this. And I had been doing WAV, but the WAV files are enormous, so I switched to using FLAC, which is also an uncompressed format. And so let me get back to.
Do you use any like VSTs or any kind of extra plugins that don't normally come with Audacity?
No, I really just use the stuff that's built in. I haven't. So to be fair, I am sort of a noob with a lot of this stuff. So what I do, so for the podcast, for DLN Extend, I actually use a service called Auphonic. And so what they do is they let you upload an audio file, and they apply these levelers and noise and hiss reduction, loudness, and so basically, and you can look at this, but it takes raw audio that would be, it's not terrible. The raw audio, like from what Nate and I do, because both of us are sort of working on getting our mics set up and working well. But you can see like it basically does the same thing as that compressor in a lot of ways. It just levels things out, brings them up, and it's actually really impressive, the output of this. And so for the podcast, I'm using this as an external tool, and that's after I've done sort of all of these steps. And it, they give you 2 hours a month for free, which is, if you're, depending on how much audio you're generating, that's actually pretty nice that they do that. And then if you want, the next tier is like $11 up to 9 hours. And then it just kind of steps from there. So it's a really interesting product, and it works. It's sort of like audio magic. You just sort of say, here's my file, and I give it the FLAC file, the output. Once I've mixed it down, so I do all the multi-track editing in Audacity. So I'll have the music and the different clips and all that stuff sort of layered in here. Export that as a FLAC, upload it here, and then you just get an MP3. You could pick what you want, but I take the MP3 output, and then that's what I end up putting on out on. I don't have it up, but out on Fireside. All right, so now I have my FLAC file somewhere. Here it is, and that just gives me my raw audio that I need. If I go back to Olive now, I'll unlink these. So Control L to unlink, delete this, come back here, drag my FLAC in, bring that down on my timeline, Ripple, delete that. And so now what I have is the same audio that I had in the other track, but now it's a separate track that's already been pre-processed, if you will, in Audacity, and you can see the waveform is much higher, much better, I guess, quality, if you will. And so once I'm done with that window, just to give myself a little more room, I'll close the project and then kind of drag down a little, and then I get my video window here, and then I can just scrub through this if I need to find where I want to go. There's a couple reasons why I really like Olive over something like Kdenlive or Shotcut or a lot of the other ones. So when I edit video, there's all of this silence that's in here and that sort of stuff. I like to cut all of that out as much as I can. So if I were to look at one of my other videos, I think I have something in here. It's my Dell XPS one that I did not long ago. So same thing. There's my wave is here. My output wave. I was still doing wave at that point. But if I open this, you'll see all the cuts that are in here. You should be able to see all the cuts, or maybe not. Yeah, that's the wrong file. Anyway, suffice to say, so basically one of the reasons that I love Olive so much is because it makes it so easy to work with the timeline specifically. And I don't know if that's something unique to what I do. So, Adam, you joked about the workflow. My workflow when I'm editing videos, I'm doing everything in the timeline. I don't know if people are doing things in the up in the media viewer and clipping in here. Like, I know you can do in and out points with like Kdenlive. You can pick sections of video to bring in and out.
Yeah, that's how I usually do it. I usually like mark in and out points and just grab clips from there.
Okay.
Because it's a little easier for me to form like a coherent kind of stream of, not necessarily making like refined clips, but kind of getting like blocking out the general like flow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so and that's great if you have lots of sources where you're sort of picking from different pieces and trying to drag them in. My problem is I have a lot of ums and ahs and pauses and dead silence, and I also do a lot of retakes where I'll say something and then I don't like how I said it, so I'll say it again, or I will cough or something. And so there's just little pieces of audio in here that I don't want. And so for me, it's the way that Kdenlive and a lot of the other video editors handle editing in the timeline is very, very clunky. Whereas in here, I can just so easily, zoom in and out, grab pieces I want. It's performant, so this is always refreshing properly. I have a problem with Kdenlive and Shotcut and others where it just doesn't update the waveforms properly, so then I can't track my audio through here. It works really well, and it is very alpha. There are definitely things like this audio meter is, it stops working, a couple minutes in and then never works again the whole time, which I don't care. I don't really even use it. There's definitely things in here that are not, super great, but anyway, it is stable. It is much more stable for me than Kdenlive. So Kdenlive will crash on me reliably every 15 to 20 minutes. And I know that there are probably ways to mitigate that, but it gets really obnoxious. And honestly, I can count on one hand the number of times Olive's crashed on me this entire year. And that's pretty impressive to me for being alpha. So one of the key things they've really focused on is the stability. And then from there, sort of expanding off on top of that. So I'm just going to go through a couple minutes of just me clipping out some things, and you can just sort of see how I'm using it and say hi to folks in chat. If you have questions about what I'm doing. So I one of the great things about this as well that drives me crazy about Kdenlive, that you can bind a lot of keys in Kdenlive, but there are certain key things that you just can't. And especially around clipping audio out of here or clipping sections out of the timeline, where here you can key. I haven't found an action yet that I wasn't able to bind to a key or that wasn't already there. So I've already, the only things I really change in the settings in the behavior is it does this default effects, which are transition or transform, and on audio, it adds like volume and some other things. I don't really want those in there unless I want to add them myself manually, so I turn that off. I also turn on Edit Tools selects links. So that means that if I put a clip in here, that it's going to extend that down across any of the linked channels in that video itself. It's not selected by default. I'm not sure why not, but it isn't. And there's other things in here that I'm sure if I edited enough video that I would probably tune these, but those are the two for me that I changed. I also have it in dark mode for you folks right now because I don't want to blow out your eyeballs, but I almost always just keep it in like super bright native mode, which would be, as bright as everything else on my screen. I know folks don't like light themes, but I'm one of those weird people. So, okay. All right. Who do we get in the chat here? Oh, we got Derek. Hey, DT, how you doing? Daniel, good to see you, man. Rose, hello, how are you? Thanks for stopping by and saying hi this evening. I guess my camera is out of frame on YouTube, it looks like, for some reason. Or maybe I'm just out of frame. Okay. All right, so I'm going to find the in point in my video here. Yes, I know this is annoying to hear all that scrubbing and clipping, but I like how I can follow along in the timeline.
For the first, you get to show we have three choices.
One of the features that I really enjoyed about
and for the second
Final Cut, I don't remember if Resolve does it or not. Final Cut has the playhead follow your cursor, so you don't have to like click anywhere for it to scrub. Makes it really great when you're using like a trackpad or something.
Yeah, there's a so Shotcut is very close in terms of the capabilities in their timeline editing. My problem is it's very slow to refresh the waveforms. Like every time you make a clip and delete it, it has to redraw the entire thing, and it just takes some amount of time. But in theirs, if you hold shift, it just follows your cursor, whereas I haven't yet found that in here. There maybe is. I know one of those settings was like scrub the playhead and things like that. So there probably is a setting, but I tend to just click, and then I also know the shortcuts for advancing with keyboard and stuff like that. So,
okay.
Yes, we will start with the.
Oh, let me share my screen. Sorry,
a blank sheet, so that I can explain for the people who haven't seen the introductions, the videos on the introductions.
Yes. So the other thing that you can do is speed up the playback, which is fun. So I use that a lot.
Question, I will go in much deeper details in these videos. So, what is a source?
Okay, so here, that's where I want to go. All right. So you have several different ways to clip the timeline, which is another thing that I really like. So Kdenlive, you kind of just make a cut, and you can then cut another piece and then select that piece, and then you delete it, and then you can cut the silence, and it's like 6 different steps. So in here, I can either use the razor tool, and that'll cut across both channels, and then I can go back to V, which is select, and then shift delete, which will delete the entire section that I have selected. And that is the single greatest time saver for me, because again, Kdenlive, to do that, I would have made that cut. I would have deleted that clip that I had selected, and then I would have had to delete the empty space, razor cut it, I guess. So people have said, well, you can bind that clear, remove space from timeline. There is a keyboard shortcut for that. But what happens is if the playhead isn't in that empty space, that keyboard shortcut won't work, which is really infuriating. So you make that cut, and then you have to either move the playhead or use the arrow keys or something to get back into that empty space, and then you can use the keyboard shortcut. But now your playhead's in the wrong place. So again, it's just really inefficient, and I'm doing this hundreds of times per video, and it just gets really obnoxious. So, all right, I've got the beginning of my video.
What is a sort?
And I would sort of just scrub through here, and
go back to
if it was my content, I remember what I said, but I will sort of watch it, and then like I said, I'll usually speed it up and just kind of, I've learned to listen to it like this.
If we take 3 digits, for instance, 1, 2, and 3, we can show them in different orders.
You can speed up crazy fast, and then you can't understand it. But so as I come through here, I'm not going to go through every little bit of this, but one of the things that I noticed on this video in particular, and on these videos in particular, it's a bit of a problem because this is such a small UI to look at on this screen, and in the end product video, it's challenging for folks to see that. Now I can zoom in the actual work area, but the menus and all the options and dialog boxes that come up are too small. So what I ended up doing and I'll just show you the rendered video. I took a copy of this video layer. Actually, I'll just show it. And what I did was I put some transforms on it and things like that. And then so just put it on, layered it literally on top. And so then what you can do is decide how you want to use that. I'm not sure where the layer is. I think it's this one.
And in fact, a sort is...
So you've got 2 layered elements here. And what I'll do is I'll turn this one off. And then what I do here is to put a transform or a crop on it. So if I go to my tools here, I can add in a distort crop. And then and you can keyframe everything. That's the other thing here that is great. So people have complained, well, there's so few filters here. And to be honest, like, I'm not making like Hollywood movies here, right? I need 3, 4, 5 of these. And the thing that drives me nuts in Kdenlive and other editors is only some of them can you keyframe. Whereas in here, every single one of these are keyframeable. And the reason that's important is at the beginning of this, I want it to start how it is. So for this crop, I want to put in keyframes for the cropping itself and leave it at 0 for all of these. And then at some point in the next couple seconds, I'm going to throw in a couple more another keyframe. And now I'm going to crop that, right? And I'm actually not yet. So I'm going to remove these because I want to get it. There's a point at which I turn my video off and I'm just showing Surge. So let me get forward to that.
Keeping all.
Yes, it doesn't take long. It's right here. Where is it? Yeah, okay. It was literally just a second.
These numbers in different ways. And this is what a sort will do. It will always keep all items.
Okay, so from this point on, now I want keyframes. I want a new keyframe. So that, and you can't see them here because I have to scroll over. Okay, so at this point, now I want to crop in to where it's just him. And I actually cut it in so it was a little smaller. It was just his face. And you can either drag like this, or you can click and then enter a value if you know that. All right, so I'm happy with that. And basically now what I've got, because my video track underneath was turned off, if I turn that back on real quick, you'll see it's just an overlay now. And what I can do with this is I can transform that and move it around the screen and get it out of my way. The other important thing is I can come back to my underlying video track. And what the reason I'm doing that in the first place is I want to zoom this in. And if I would have done that, then I would have lost the camera because it's in the top right corner. And so I had to recreate that section of the video track. And then now the underlying track, the one I'm keeping the main canvas, I'm going to come in here and do the same thing with keyframes for position and scale. And then at the same point that I do the transition for the camera, so I'll advance to that keyframe. This is probably more than you ever wanted to know about keyframing. But at this point in the keyframe, now I'm going to switch back to this track and put in keyframes there. And I'm going to then scale this to, I think I did 135, and then position it. And you see there's the video frame in the background, but I'm losing it because I'm moving this. And then I'm going to bring it down so that we could just see the menus. And so now this is a much more visible, viewable piece of video, and I can do a full screen preview. So this is much easier to see for the person watching the video. I don't like that he's where he is. So now I can come back to that track, and at this same point in the keyframe, I can also add in position. So I'm actually going to go back to the beginning, put in keyframes for position and scale, go back to my keyframe here, put in new ones. Oh, I already had one. Yeah. And now I'm going to position this. And for this one, I can actually just grab it and move it around. And I'm just going to stick him up here in the corner. I don't know what the heck save frame was. Okay. So now I can just stick him in the corner here. And now all of a sudden, so I did that, it's a combination of filters, but because of the keyframes, that lets me do this transform. So if I go back to the raw video before the keyframe, now you'll see what happens when it sweeps through these keyframes. 3, 1, 2, and 3 to 1. And gets to this point.
These are orders.
Which will be in fact,
here. A sort is.
We don't have to wait the whole time. And you can see it's going to go from
these
from
numbers
this, and
in
see how
different
it's
ways.
doing
And
this
this is
slow transform. That's because I actually screwed up. What I should have done is
what
just before these transforms, put in keyframes for on this one and left it at 100%, because otherwise you see it was that long. The distance between your keyframes is the amount of time it takes for these filters to be applied. So really what you want is a short break between them. So let me get this back to where it should be. It's 960. And I don't remember what that is, but okay. So those keyframes are back to where it would be normally, and then these keyframes will be back. You see that the amount of time now back on you.
But you see there are 4 other possibilities.
I'd have to go back and reset that other one too. Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing a horrible job of showing this. It's really not this difficult. What you just normally do is when you want something to transform, and this goes for audio as well, you let it run up to the point that you want it to transform, and then the thing that you're doing, it's usually you want that to happen quickly, not over this long 15-second. You can see it sweeping in from the left there in the video. That kind of looks dumb. So you'd want that to start here and end here, and then what you get is a nice like 1 second wipe or 1 second transform or crop or whatever it is you're doing. So apparently I'm terrible at doing this and talking about it at the same time. So anyway, so that's one of the reasons, again, why I think Olive is so powerful is, yes, there are not, if you look at Kdenlive and you add the Freyr, however you say that, FE01ER plugins pack, you end up with 100 different filters. My experience has been that they are of varying quality, and some of them are basically useless or redundant, and most of them are not keyframeable. And so the fact that I at least have this handful here that gives me the option to add these different things and then also do these transitions myself. So it doesn't have to be a 1 second wipe. It could be a 3 second wipe. It doesn't have to be a, and you can do, pretty much literally everything you'd want to be able to do. Rotate things, wipe things, all those transition effects that you're getting in, iMovie and the more polished, I guess, easier to use editors. You can reproduce those pretty easily in here. And so I've done videos where I do just like wipes and pop-ups and things will, come in from the side and like all the different animations. And those are all just transforms. In most cases, it's the position, the scale, the opacity. So if I'm bringing a bar in and I want it to start clear, I can set the first keyframe to be 0 opacity and the second one to be 100. And then over that duration, it will carry out that transformation. And you can layer them, you can stack them, you can have multiple transformations, and it can be complicated, but once you have something you're happy with, you can reuse it in different projects. So it takes a little bit of time, but this gives you all of the tools that you need to be able to customize it in a way that really lets you control exactly what it's doing. And I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination. I've edited the 100 videos or so that I've done over the last several years. And I've used DaVinci Resolve. I've used some other systems. And from what I've seen of the better quality, what I would consider to be better quality video editing systems, the ones that I've used, their keyframing is a lot like this. It's a lot more granular, very specific. So I think, to me, that means that all of who the people who are making it have put a lot of effort behind that, thinking like how could a power user use this, right? Maybe the way that they improve this in the future is that instead of making it so hands-on, that they just add certain things. And they do have some stuff that are built in, some transitions and things, fades and crossfades and stuff like that, which are essentially just filters like that, which I assume, or transformations or keyframe things like that they've just sort of built in as prepackaged, modules or widgets or whatever you want to call it. So, anyway, all right, let me jump back, see what's happening in the chat. Hey, Joe. How you doing, man? Good to see you. Just reading. I can't read and talk at the same time. This is why I'm a terrible streamer and why I don't do it that often, because I am not a good multitasker. So, anyway. All right. So, hopefully this is showing some of the more powerful features of Olive. Again, I recognize I'm not a power user. Anyway, so we've got our layering effects here. I was able to crop out the camera as it moves forward and gets to this point.
All items,
finally,
all
it will
records
transform
of your
and get us back to where the camera's where I want it to be. This is now zoomed in, and as I move through here and I'm adding data and sorting and all of the things that I'm doing in the video, the dialog boxes, all of this stuff is just now much easier to see and use than or see and consume, watching on a video than it was before. So that's what I was after. I was able to do that pretty easily. If I wasn't explaining it, I would have been able to do that in just a couple minutes. And after you do it just a few times, it really is pretty straightforward. So the other things I wanted to show, so some of the clipping in the timeline here. So I showed the razor tool where I can just clip across these. The other option I have, which I absolutely love, is the, let's see, what do they call it? I don't know what they call it. Well, it's X on my keyboard. Oh, there it is. Edit tool. So edit tool basically lets me grab any section of this and just literally highlight it. And then again, just like with the razor tool, this is already selected now. So it's as if I made a clip at the beginning and a clip at the end. And I can then just clip that section. So and I'm holding my hand on the keyboard and I'm just doing Control Delete. So with my right hand on the mouse and my left hand on the keyboard, I can very easily grab sections of this video that I don't want to keep and just chunk them out. And now you see it's only selecting on the first track, and that's because I unlinked the other tracks. So let me link all these back together. And that's just Shift to highlight them and then Control L to link the highlighted tracks. Now if I come in here and I grab that, it's going to delete all of that. Shift delete, boom. I don't want that space. Shift delete, boom. So I can come through here and cut this so quickly in comparison to what I'd been doing in Kdenlive and other editors. So that saves me a tremendous amount of time and really just works very, very well. So that's my basic process, cutting through here. So I would just refine this and just keep going and clipping out the silence where needed. The other thing that I'll mention, so if in a normal video for me, there's a lot of silence, a lot of coughing, a lot of just like ums and ahs and basically space. So just clipping that silence takes quite a lot of time. And so for like this Dell video, what I did was I found a way. There's a tool. I think I may have it on here. Yes, it's called Jump Cutter. It's a Python script essentially. And what it does, let's see if they explain it in here. Probably not. So basically what it does is you can tune it to cut silence from video automatically. Now with audio, this is pretty easy. There's already tools in Audacity, and you saw how when I had Audacity open earlier, if I wanted to, I could just come in here and say clip silence. Let's hear some truncate silence, and then tune it to say, well, what's the threshold? What's the duration? And, and have it just clip that out. And so if this was just spoken word podcast sort of stuff, that's really easy to do. The problem is this is audio only. So if I was to do that and then bring that back into Olive or some video editor, now I have a synchronization problem because my video doesn't benefit from that. So the real thing that I'm trying to do here is with an input video, and I'm not sure which one this one was. Oh, this is the Dell video. So the input was 42 minutes long. And what I ended up with after I ran this process, this jump cutter, was let's see, it's actually here, input altered.
Hello again, everybody.
So I ended up with a 31-minute video. So that means in a 48 minute? What was the original? 42 minutes. Okay, so that means that I cut out, 11 minutes of just nothing. So if I had to do that myself manually, that means that I would have been doing in 1 or 2 second chunks 11 minutes worth of cuts in here. And even though Olive makes that much easier than other video editors for me, that's still a tremendous amount of time. So on a video like this Dell video, it's, the final video I think was around that 30 some minute mark. That would have taken me probably 2 hours to trim out all of that audio, all of those silences. And I mean, it's just, it's incredible how much time something like this tool will save you. And it takes a while for this to run. So I think it took a good 30 minutes or so to run on my Ryzen 8 core system. So, I mean, it's not a light process, and the input itself being 42 minutes long. The guy that created this, the reason he created it was some of his courses, he would either watch the videos, his college courses, he would watch the video, and a lot of his professors were long-winded or had a lot of pauses in what they were doing, or they'd be writing something on the board. And so he was trying to watch these videos, but watch them and get, get his schoolwork done. And so what he came up with was, well, there's got to be some way for me to trim these down. And so he was able to figure out this Python script, basically, which uses FFmpeg. Everything uses FFmpeg. Talk about the jack of all trades tool. So FFmpeg wrapped in Python, and then you put in the parameters of it's looking for silence in the audio. And then instead of just like with Audacity here, clipping out the audio silence, it's also then clipping out the video portion of that as well. And it's intelligent enough to make the clips smooth. So it has a read, it can, so for like S's, F's, certain sounds are not strong enough. And so I've used another type of tool like this, and it didn't do a very good job. It clipped off a lot of my beginning and ends of words and sentences. And it was basically worthless because now my audio is garbage. This one, you can do a like 1 second read, 1 second prior, 1 second post. And so it's going to leave a little bit of silence in there, but not as much as you had before. And so, yeah, this is pretty unbelievable. It saved me a tremendous amount of time on that Dell video, at least a few hours. I mean, I still had to go back in because the final altered one.
Hello again, everybody. I've had a few requests asking me
coughing,
to do a video. Things pretty,
repeating myself.
Part of it, I don't know.
So I still had to.
I'm certainly not advocating doing that if you're not comfortable.
Definitely cut that out. Things like that. So, anyway, so that's, if I'm thinking my process from like start to finish, if it's just me, Surge, this wouldn't have made sense with Surge because I don't want to cut. Some of those pauses made sense because they were me typing something into the spreadsheet, or that video wasn't a good candidate. But any of the ones where it's just my screen and me talking in the background, those are perfect for this. And so I would record that, run it through this process, go back and split out the audio the same way I would in Audacity, save that out to a FLAC file, bring both the video and the FLAC file into Olive, trim out any of the repeats or retakes I did, coughs, stuff like that to get it down. But of course, that's much faster now because I don't have to do all the silence as well. Add my title, add my music. And I mean, so each successive video, and I've heard Derek talk about this, where until you do 100 videos, and I don't even know if 100 was the right number, but until you do like some very large amount of work in this type of process, you don't quite come to terms with like, what is your process? What's the most efficient way to do this? How do you make it so that it's easy enough for you to do and not so time consuming and taxing that you start to dread doing them? Because you want it to be, I want it to be fun, right? I'm doing this because I enjoy doing it. Hopefully other people enjoy it. But ultimately, if I don't like it and I don't want to do it, then I'm not going to. And so each time I find something that's bothering me, I just I'm like, okay, this is my opportunity to learn something new, see if I can find a better process. Yeah. So Joe, yeah, Olive is still in alpha, believe it or not. It's kind of amazing to me. They are working on the next release, and I'm actually a patron on Patreon because I've basically just come to rely on it. And if I didn't have Olive available, it would be a big deal. Could I adapt? Yeah, certainly. I mean, I keep going back. I'm not closed-minded. Like every new release of Shotcut, every new release of Kdenlive, I'll go back and try it. I'll actually even, I've done some just personal comparisons where I'll edit a video in Olive, and then I'll come back and I'll say, okay, can I do that same process in a reasonably efficient way in Kdenlive or something else? And thus far, the answer's been no. So anyway, the Olive team have a Patreon. And so I am a patron of theirs. They have a Discord instance server, whatever. And so I can follow along on there, and their GitHub too. They're pretty open about the commits they're making, and you can see the progress and the changes. One of the big things they're working on is they're refactoring the back-end engine and some of the timeline stuff and the filtering. They're doing a lot. So between the alpha and beta that I believe will be coming out later this year or earlier next year, they're putting in a tremendous amount of work. Instead of just iterating on something that they know isn't the base they want pieces of it, and they are getting a lot of feedback from people on how they're using it. But ultimately, I think they recognize it's a better option for them to put the effort in up front to get something solid out there. So they're putting, I mean, already I have to tell you that from a performance standpoint, it's pretty incredible. So even on my laptop, if I am using the Intel chip, which is just the integrated chip, so I don't have the hardware acceleration enabled. When you get a bunch of filters and transformations and stuff in here, first of all, I don't have to do proxy clips. These clips are just native, resolution and size. This isn't a proxy clip thing. So they're running at full resolution and full quality. And then you can add in a ton of transforms and layers. So ultimately, what my projects will look like is there'll be titles and overlays as another video track. There'll be music. There'll be an in and out graphics, or in graphics usually. And so I've got a bunch of different layers, a bunch of different transforms. And what I've found in other video editors is the more things you put on there, when you are rendering your preview,
It's just because it had it selected.
it's trying to show all those things to you. And if you look at the frame rate on something like Kdenlive, let's say your project's 30 frames per second. If you can get 10 frames per second out of your preview with all of your stuff in place, it's actually pretty impressive. Whereas this is running at native frame rate. It doesn't bog. It can do all of those transforms, all those layers, all the effects and everything in real time on unaccelerated hardware. And it doesn't crush your system. It doesn't crush your memory. It doesn't, I mean, if I look at my system monitor right now, so it's using 1.3. I mean, OBS is using more than the video editor. I mean, I've got plenty available on my system, so it's not like I'm going to run out anytime soon. But, and even from like a processor standpoint, I mean, yeah, it's definitely, that's OBS using 40% of the processor, by the way, or 16% according to this. Let's look at HTOP. Yeah, it's OBS is what's grabbing all the processor right now, because it's rendering, you know, out to the stream. So it's somehow it is lightweight on resources relatively, and can do all of those rendering things in real time without bogging down. And again, this is alpha, so the fact that it can do those things is pretty impressive. I mean, if I do this in full screen, and you see that it's
cover selection. Yes.
I mean,
okay. Normally they are here in ascending.
Now his camera's
order.
off because
could you click now on
track to the right?
I'm going to get rid of this column.
But I mean, you can see it's smooth.
Delete
There's
that
absolutely no stutter, no lag.
You select all
My
from
system
A1 to
isn't
and you
know, wailing away in the background. So yeah, there are a lot of things that are really impressive about this right now as an alpha. So looking forward to what they do in terms of what they consider non-alpha is definitely very exciting. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing where that goes. So Rose, how long does it usually take for video editing? Well, as I said, and as I've learned from others like Derek and, you know, other people that I've watched creating content, when you start, it's horrific. It takes forever for a couple of different reasons. One is you don't understand the technology, and you really have to come to terms with like how to use the systems, how to use the different software and get it running optimally. So a lot of things take time to get tuned just right. And then your own experience with it in terms of how you use it. So learning the keyboard shortcuts, things like however I can use this in a faster way to do the repetitive tasks that I do over and over. That takes time to really come to terms with and get good at. The other part of that is what you consider to be good to do. So some of this is just process, and some of it is, you know, software and hardware and getting all those things to work the way that you want them to do. And a big part of it too is who am I? What am I saying? What am I trying to put out there? Am I happy with this? And that part can be just a serious, like just will scramble your brain. I'll sit and look at the same video for way too long and then just get sick of it and have to walk away. And it's good, because if I don't walk away, then I start editing and I start clipping, and I'll make it worse than it is if I would just walk away and leave it alone and come back to it and just give it a little time to marinate. And because if my process is to sit and record all the raw content and then to immediately jump into editing it, the good of that is that it's still fresh in my mind. So I don't have to really review it all that much. I'm really just sort of watching it as it goes by and then doing the technical part of clipping it and whatever. The bad part is I've given myself no time between when I've laid it down and when I'm coming back and evaluating it. Right. And so sometimes that's a bad thing, because depending on sometimes recording is very frustrating because you may have technical issues. You may not, it may have taken you a long time to get that down. There could have been like the lawn crew shows up and like, this was the hour you had to sit and do the work, and now all of a sudden now you can't. And so there's all these emotional things behind it, and trying to sound interested, trying to sound excited, or having a level of, engagement. There's so many videos I've made where I sound like I'm a robot, or I'm completely bored, and I've just never, I won't use it, because if I think it sucks, I'm guessing that most other people will too. And it's, maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm more critical of myself, but I think that's healthy, right? I mean, someone said, and I can't remember who this was now, they watch every single second of video that they put out there, because it's important to them that they, if other people have to watch it, they have to watch it too, right? And, there's this self sort of criticism part of it. In one hand, it's good, because you do have to sort of find your voice and figure out what your style is and what you want to do. On the other hand, it can be a little crippling. And so if you give yourself a little time and space, it sort of works itself out of, in my opinion, at least, in my experience. And I feel like each video I make, I'm giving myself a little more time before I just start talking. I prepare, put some notes together, think about some things I'm going to say. I'll even maybe, because I always test my setup before I start recording, because I've done that too, where you get halfway in and you look and you go, oh, I just spent 20 minutes talking to myself because it wasn't working. So when I do the test recording, I'll do 5 minutes of me just like blah, 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 talking. And even just that, it's a warm up. You kind of get your mind going. It's really weird. I've never done anything like this. I just decided I'm going to start making videos, or, the podcast thing, whatever. I've never have I had an interest or what I've, an aptitude, anything like that. And so I'm learning all of this as I go. And it's really interesting and fun because it's a new thing, and I like learning new things and doing new things. The technology is fun because I get to learn new programs and use my computer. But it's a challenge because there's some self-reflection aspects of it and self-criticism that you wouldn't necessarily put yourself under that sort of scrutiny otherwise. So that was a very long way of answering. At first, it takes forever and you're never happy with what you get. But at some point, you just have to stop, because if you don't, you'll either never make another video or you'll just drive yourself insane. And then as you go forward, you learn the tools, you get better at it. So from the technical side of it, that becomes easier because you're just doing it enough. And then on the emotional and the sort of how you feel about what you're doing, you start to find that voice, and you're getting feedback from people too. I mean, and you're watching the view counts of videos. I mean, I've had videos that I've been really proud of and really happy with that have 30 views. And that's okay, because if those 30 people that saw it took something away from it, good, then that was the point of doing it. But on the other hand, I'll make a video that I thought was hot garbage. And I mean, ones that I've just hesitated even putting out there, and they get, hundreds, thousands of views. And it's like, I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not always the best judge of what my best work is or what's interesting to other people. And so getting that feedback is really helpful. And it's a very, very odd thing, and I think for people that are trying hard to get an audience to grow, because to be honest, like I'm happy doing the things I do. I'm happy, for the feedback that I get and the folks that are, watching what I do. I have no delusions of ever being like some kind of YouTube star or, and that's fine, because honestly, as soon as it became a pressure situation, or I felt like I had to perform at a certain level or had to be, and I want to make good quality content, but it doesn't have to be super popular for me to be happy with it. Because as soon as I felt like it was a job, I probably would not want to do it anymore. I probably have much less interest in doing it. And funny enough, the most popular things I do are these streams, and I always think they're terrible because I always have technical problems, and they never work the way I hope that they would. The camera's wrong, the mic's wrong, the whatever. It's like always something is wrong, and it drives me crazy. But people like them. I get a lot of views. I get people coming and watching, and then watching them later, and it always surprises me. I'm happy for it, but it's always unexpected. Hey, Derek. Good to see you, man. How you doing? So, yeah, DT says, I had to find a balance, try to spend as little time editing as possible. Yeah, it's funny. So I mentioned the streams. You want to know why people stream and why they like streaming? You don't have to edit anything. When I'm done with this video tonight, it stays the way it is on YouTube. I'll go in and I'll change I'll add some additional metadata and stuff to it. I'll put some tags on it and some end cards and like little YouTube-y stuff that you do, but I don't have to touch it, right? This is the final product. And that's why people like streaming, because it's easy from that standpoint, right? Yeah, all the technical problems that I complain about and that are a pain in the butt, but like the end of this is when I click stop streaming and we all say goodbye to each other, like I have 5 minutes of work to do on YouTube and we're done, which is incredible. Considering it takes me hours to make a 15-minute video, it's the time investment for this is the time I'm willing to sit here in front of my computer and do this. So that's why people like streaming, right? And why so few people make videos. And I'll say this in a nice way, like edited videos that are like put together, edited down, like the stuff you saw me doing, like knowing that someone wasn't going to be able to see the background, the spreadsheet, and taking the time to build those layers and do that. I'm sure people would say, well, it's a waste of time. Like, why even bother doing it? But to me, it matters, right? If I'm going to put out a video a week or a video every couple of days or whatever, I don't care if 10 people watch it. I want the 10 people to watch it to be able to watch it and actually enjoy it. So same thing with the audio and like all the things that I've done to try to get the quality to be at a certain baseline. I haven't spent thousands and thousands of dollars on equipment, but I recognized that the first mic I had sounded terrible and that no one was going to watch my videos because I can't stand listening to videos that sound terrible. So why would I expect someone to watch mine that does sound terrible? So I bought a better microphone, that kind of stuff. Like, I think there's a lot of content out there that it just doesn't sort of achieve a certain level of quality. And frankly, these tools are so inexpensive now, and all of the stuff I use is open source. So the overhead, and I know DT's taken that to a different level than me, but of course I don't have the viewer count that he does. So anyway, so let's see. So Derek says, DT says, I've had videos that I've spent 12 hours recording and editing and was very proud of. Hardly anyone watched it. Yeah, it's amazing. And 12 hours sounds insane, but I'm sure there was a video that took me, I'm trying to think of what, literally days, because I was so frustrated with it. The content was good, but I just couldn't get it edited the way I wanted. And I would work on it for hours at a time, and then I would just get disgusted because I just wasn't finding what I was looking for. And so I'd leave it. And I bet you over a course of a week, I spent 15 hours on it, a ridiculous amount of time. And I think it was a 20-minute video at the end, which just sounds stupid, but I recognize that part of this is just me learning how to do it. So obviously if I was working for someone and it took me 20 hours to make a 20-minute video that wasn't like Hollywood graphics and splashy and, like they would, I wouldn't have that job for very long. Like I'm doing that. It's taking me that long because I'm doing it for myself as much as for anyone else. And I want to be happy with it. And I want to figure out why don't I like this? What is wrong with this? You know, why don't I like this video? And why can't I get this right? And take the extra time to do it. So, but yeah, it's funny how much time. Yeah, Joe says streaming's easy, but then you can't hide the mistakes. You know, it's funny, Joe. I think a lot of people appreciate that, and especially for us. I mean, we all know each other. This is our crowd here. I don't expect many people outside of this group to watch this, and that's fine because I'm talking to you guys. I'm hanging out with you guys on purpose, because like I said, I was sitting here doing this anyway, and I figured, hey, why not just throw out a stream? So I think a lot of people like the fact that streams are just talk, you know, just us hanging out, noise and unpolished, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be. I'm happy with the, you know, goofy little graphic that I created. It's a little template in OBS. It takes me a couple minutes to just put the titles in and stuff and throw the YouTube chat in there. And I mean, I don't feel like I need to make it any fancier than that. So, but yeah, it is fun and I do enjoy it. And I definitely like the panel chats that we have when I have Adam and Nate and Matt and other people on. Oh, by the way, if anyone wants to, I'm on Discord as well, on the Biddle Discord down in the live right now section, and your voice will come through on YouTube if you're interested in that. So Dan and Joe and anyone else, if you guys are hanging out and want to come say hi on Discord, feel free. Or anyone else, obviously. Oh my goodness, let's see. EV. Uh-oh. How you doing? Good to see you. Who else we have? Anyone? This is an excellent crowd tonight. Good mix. I honestly, I mean, I've got 18 people watching right now. I thought I was going to get none, frankly, because I didn't announce it. And then it's Sunday night at 9:30 Eastern in the U.S. Technically 10:30, but, you know, we just did that fallback yesterday. And I figured everybody would be, you know, out for the night, and that I wouldn't see anybody. So I'm happy to see folks. EB says, "What's Olive? You missed all the good stuff, EB." Yeah, Olive is a video editor. It's an alternative for something like Kdenlive or Shotcut, or, you know, any of the other open source editors. And it is. You missed all the good stuff, EB. For me, it's a video editor. It's an alternative for something like Kdenlive.
Dan, you're echoing. And be careful what you wish for, Eric.
Oh, I wish for it. Listen, Joe, when you sit here and talk to yourself for an hour, you know, it gets a little
yeah, I'm not keeping him company.
No, it's okay.
Playing more Borderlands, are you?
No, I was just listening to what he had to say.
It's very interesting. Eric, don't discount what you're saying here. I mean, yeah, I know it's got to be hard just talking, but it's very, very interesting. Now, I don't know if you know this or not. I had put a question in the chat, like, how does DaVinci Resolve, the free version, vary from the paid version? And then I did see some things there, but I don't know anything about it. But the other thing I'd be curious about is, how does that compare to what this is? Because this looks so wonderful. I mean, I still can't believe it's an alpha.
Yeah, it's DaVinci. I mean, it's not in the same league at all. I mean, DaVinci has an unbelievable set of capabilities. It is really a professional production tool. And the reason for that mainly is because, so DaVinci's big draw, its big selling point for the longest time, and still to this day, I believe, is the coloration tool. So you'll do things like you'll do your main video editing in Sony Vega, or like some, Adobe Premiere. And then if you want to do special effects or titles or anything like that, you're going to bring it into like After Effects and stuff like that. But then any kind of color work, where you'd want to change the tinting of something. I mean, it's an extreme example, but if you think of like the Matrix, where it's all green and stuff like that, that would be color work. Shading, all of that. DaVinci was the tool, or again, could still be the tool for doing that. So even if you did all that editing everywhere else, you bring it into DaVinci, and then you would do your coloration in that tool, and then the output of that would go probably to some other system. So there's the chain, and that's someone like Jill would probably do a really good job of explaining how some of that works. But suffice to say, they, over the last few versions, they've added a lot more in terms of capability into the system. I started using it around like 11, and when it was really just the basic tools of bringing in clips, getting them on a timeline, doing some editing, and like all the basic stuffs that you would have here in Olive. Excuse me. And then the coloration aspect of it, and then sort of an output, export. And the way that they do it is in a almost like a tabbed interface, or different sort of modules, different screens. And so the first screen is the project screen, and the second screen is the clips and importing the media, and the third screen is clipping the media or getting it on the timeline, and then the fourth one is sort of laying it out. The fifth one is, I think, the coloration, if I'm not mistaken. The sixth one is there's an audio only, where you can do all of the sort of audio processing and stuff like that. And then there's an output. So they've, between the versions that I started using and 16, which I just tried a couple weeks ago, the one that Rocco's been using, it is like, it's everything, as far as I can see, it's everything you would ever need to create very, very high quality professional videos. Whereas you can do those things in these types of tools, so Kdenlive and Olive and Shotcut and stuff like that. You can edit down video, you can mix clips, you can add effects, you can do coloration, you can do filtering and stuff like that. But it's all in a single UI, and it's all very sort of piecemeal. Whereas a tool like DaVinci Resolve, or any of the the other tools out there, they sort of they give you because they're professional tools, right? It's the difference between something like GIMP and Photoshop. I mean, there's many more differences, and I'm not saying that you can't do that work in GIMP, but the standard is Photoshop, and everybody uses it because that's what everybody uses. And so I think DaVinci's sort of pushing into that market. They also do a lot with hardware. So they'll sell workstations, rendering servers, different types of hardware that goes along with their software as well. So they've got a pretty robust offering in that market. I don't do anything fancy enough at this point. So when I was trying it a few weeks ago, it's impressive. It's amazing. It's incredible that they let you use it for free. I mean, it's limited in the output, and that's kind of how they get you, is if you want to do high quality output, you have to pay for it. But even there, it's not that expensive, frankly. If you were doing it as you made any money whatsoever off it, it was totally justified. But it's
just what you said. I mean, when you think about it, it's $2.99 by what I saw for the price, for if it can truly produce all of what you just stated. The only thing is, you mentioned like After Effects. Is that kind of a must, or can you still? Because I'm thinking Linux. I mean, obviously After Effects does not support for Linux yet, and that kind of thing. But I mean, it's just the idea that it in fact has that capability, and it does support Linux. I mean, that says something, that it's basically choice of these other proprietary softwares not supporting yet, like Photoshop and the others. To me, I mean, I don't know anything about this, and I've been curious and start, kind of peeking at it. But this sounds like, even for the novice person or somebody that's even a little bit more advanced, the tools that are out there already would still be applicable for producing something that would be somewhat halfway decent or better. Is that pretty much my understanding, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. So the biggest concern I have, the biggest problems I had, so I'm not a seasoned video editor, and the tool I started with was Kdenlive because that's what everybody recommended. The problem I had was it crashes on me a lot, and it's very frustrating because you get into you're just trying to learn your way around, right? You don't even know what you're doing. You bring in your audio, your files, and you just start putting stuff on the timeline, and you're trying to clip it apart and get it the way you want, and you add a filter, and you're learning the ropes, right? And then all of a sudden it just crashes on you, and you're like, okay. And even if it recovers, which in many cases it will, hopefully you didn't lose any of the recent work you did, but if you recover, that's a jarring experience. And then, okay, you're back in it. Now you're going to, you're getting a little bit further into it. And then all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, crashes again. And you're like, well, I wasn't even doing anything. Like, what? Okay, I'll do that again. And after the 10th time of that, you just start to go, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And so you just go and you start to read, and you're like, oh, okay, this is just sort of almost like a running joke that Kdenlive is crashy. Like, it just is. And so, okay. And I know there are lots of people that use it every single day. They make amazing work with it. And I'm sure they've found ways to mitigate those crashes. And maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it just continues to be that way for me. And I try every subsequent release. So then I ran did the game that we all do, right? Well, what's the alternative? I mean, even though everyone says that's the best one, I'm going to at least go see what else is out there. So then there's, Shotcut, which is good. And I think it has a lot of positives to it. It doesn't crash. At least, it crashed on me a couple times, but not as much. And then, but it has some really weird things to it. Like, it doesn't work the way you think it would work, and it's a little slow, and the UI is kind of a little clunky and strange, and these are all personal observations. These aren't, there are lots of people that use it that like it. And so then I went, and I'm trying to think of all the different ones I've tried, and I've basically tried them all. And that was right around the time that Olive came out, and I came into Olive, and literally I've been there ever since because it just made sense to me. And software is a very subjective thing. It's what makes sense to you and how you use it. And stability was a big factor for me. Like I said, I can count on one hand the number of times it's crashed on me in the last year. And so it's super stable. It's also very simple, which I like because I feel like Kdenlive, when I open that up, there's just so much there. It's all packed in, and there's, 24 menus and all these different choices. And it's just, it looks so overwhelming. And that was my experience with DaVinci Resolve too. Yeah, it's professional. It can do any possible thing probably that you'd ever need it to do, especially someone like me. But my goodness, the overhead, like the learning curve on something like that. I sat here and I thought, well, I'm sure if I took the time to learn it, it would be worth it. But the kind of videos I make, is it? I'm kind of cool with what I'm doing now, and it works for me, and it's not $300, and so but see, Rocco's gotten to that point, right? I think he was having problems with Kdenlive, maybe some of the same issues I was talking about, and for him, it was worth trying it out, and so far he says he's really happy with it. So
the other thing that comes to mind with what you're stating, I, again, never having been to any of the Linux fests, I equate those to similar to like small conventions. And I know when I used to go, when I was in the building trades, to these different shows or conventions, and not only were you there for things pertaining to the trade, the building industry, whether it was codes or, the logistics of the building, but then there were a lot of the software companies that went along with it. Like I did design work when I specifically went to a Mahler's convention in Chicago. I mentioned this just recently, where I was looking for something to design ramps, and I found SketchUp back then when SketchUp was independent. It wasn't owned by Google. It was a different way of drawing, and I absolutely love that program. And there's a learning curve with it, but when you go and you meet the people that create this, and you could see firsthand how it works, even though, you know, a percentage of it's going to stick, you at least will remember when you look at maybe tutorials down the road, or if there's YouTube, like they have a channel for that stuff. And then SoftPlan was another one for designing houses that they have grown to the point where they have it integrated in there now. So I guess my point is, even though that's building related, it's the same principle. Why are not these people that are these developers that are making these programs, why are they not at these different type fests or conventions or things like that, where they can sit and have interaction with users and talk about the things and the experiences, and maybe that would help them, you know, in their development of the program and advance it, and maybe even expand the usage of it, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. 100%. And that part of me doing this tonight was I feel like Olive has a lot of merit. And I think for a lot of people, especially people doing stuff like me, that's pretty simple. I feel like it gives you the simple, sort of straightforward on-ramp to start doing video editing. I mean, all the tools are really self-apparent. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you bring your files in, it shows them to you. The project settings are really simple. I mean, there's not, you know, 1,000 different options for different things in project settings. Exporting is really simple. You know, you pull your stuff down in the timeline, you just start moving it around, putting it where you want it, clip it, you know, add whatever transitions and effects and stuff you want to it. It's to me, it's just straightforward. It's easy.
Well, I'd like to start experimenting with maybe Olive or something like that. Is, you know, I was in real estate for a period of time too with my wife, and she's still, I mean, she's a top producer and she's worked very hard. And I thought, God, it'd be nice to start putting some little short videos or whatever for some of her properties together. My son is a videographer, photographer, but he's so busy. He just went independent and travels a lot and that sort of thing. And sometimes you don't always need the fanciest things, depending on the property or what you were looking to do with it. But, you know, I used to use, like everybody else, Movie Maker, or, you know, the simple stuff. And and now looking at them, they're so unprofessional looking by today's standards, because there's nothing more than a glorified slideshow with some, you know, fancy tricks on them a little bit. But I thought, you know, for that reason in itself, I was curious to learn, maybe, you know, doing some of this stuff and playing with it a little bit. And to me, it seems like by what you described and showed tonight with Olive, it's very exciting to see that. And that's why I say I'm just still blown away. It's still in an alpha. It's not even in a beta yet, because it seems like it's already, maybe I'm over speaking because I don't know the familiarity with using Kdenlive, but it seems like it's kind of almost passing that by, because if it's not having crashy issues even in an alpha state, that says an awful lot for it, doesn't it?
It does. And I don't know if you caught the part about the performance too. That's a big factor that I've found in like Kdenlive, Shotcut, and some of the others, where just playing the video, trying to get the native frame rate. So the raw video itself being at so I'm recording at 30 frames per second, and you know, fairly high quality, just because I want the source video to be good. And then, you know, when you bring that into certain programs, just getting it to play at 30 frames a second can be, you're sort of at like the capacity of what you can do. And then now you start clipping, you add in some layers and filters, and getting it to show you what you've done prior to rendering it. So you're doing the real-time basically real-time rendering. If you can get half the frame rate of that, you know, so 15 frames a second and it's skipping frames, and the audio's clipping and cutting out. Like, I've just had really bad experiences with that in other systems. And I don't know if it's because most of those are based on MLT framework, which is sort of the kind of jack of all trades, video editing framework. I know that's the least technical way to explain that, but that so Kdenlive's using MLT, and I know several others are as well. And so that is sort of the foundation of all of them, and they're building on it, and they're extending it, and they're using it, and they're doing different things with it. But ultimately, that is the limitation of those systems. And I believe, and I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn, but I believe that is one of the challenges, is that framework itself is an older framework, and it's not necessarily optimized for hardware. I mean, those systems don't really take advantage of hardware acceleration very well. Now, Olive, even on systems where I don't have powerful hardware, it's able to render everything. The video is playing at 30 frames per second. I put a bunch of filters and cuts and transitions and stuff. It's still running at 30 frames per second. There's no audio issues. There's no video skipping, clipping issues or juddering or any of that stuff. And it's just doing it. And again, it's an alpha. And so the reason for that is because they built their own rendering system. Like all of that stuff, it's not using MLT. It's not using anything. I mean, it's probably using a lot of open source libraries and tools and stuff like that. But ultimately, the work that went into this alpha was that they built their own foundation. And so to me, that's probably why it's so stable and doesn't crash as much as other systems. And two, it's so performant and is able to render this stuff the way it does. So just those things alone make it a worthwhile experience for me. But then the simplicity of it and just how straightforward it is to do that. And also the fact that I'm able to do stuff like I was showing, the keyframing and the different filters and stuff that are available. If I want to put the extra effort in, it's going to give me the tools and the capabilities to do that. It doesn't automate a lot of it, so I could see that maybe being a complaint or challenge for some folks. But ultimately,
I was going to say those things might be things to come, though, too, as it progresses, don't you think?
Yeah.
Basically, what you described is, in essence, like a Linux from scratch, but in this case, we're talking about an app, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, and another thing I know, so if I think of like Michael Tunnell, right? He does a lot of scripting, and I know you can with Kdenlive. That's a big thing that people use, is the ability to be able to script edits and clips and things, and there's a whole like sort of scripting process that goes along with that. I have not tried or done anything like that with Olive, so I'm not even entirely sure that it supports that. But if it doesn't, then that would be something that, if you have a process that's built on Kdenlive and it goes beyond to just the dumb things that I do in the editor, and it's more of like a whole workflow process, then yeah, that's probably a strength of that system. So the alpha, I think, again, for someone like me, the stability and simplicity of it, and the ability to do, things that maybe go beyond that, are what's attractive. And the fact that people just don't seem to either know about it or hear about it. I mean, that was most of the point tonight, was to just say, I keep saying this, I'll keep bringing it up because I do believe that it's true, but here's what I do with it, and here's how I do it, and this is why I like it. And it really is a viable choice. So if you go to their website, they have a Ubuntu repository, so you could actually just you can have it be a repository. They haven't updated it in quite a while, so it's not like you have to worry about getting new versions all the time, at least at this point. Unlike Kdenlive and some of those other ones where there's basically a monthly release at this point. So they have that. They have a app image, I believe. They have a Flatpak, which is what I use. I use the Flatpak version. They may have a snap. Let me pull it up, because I mean they've kind of got all the bases covered for packages.
Yeah, I just pulled I went into the software center, and I actually had just the repo loaded, and I pulled that out and put the Flatpak in, because I like the Flatpaks. It's you're bound to get more current stuff. But I have seen from time to time. I mean, when I first loaded it, probably a few months ago, it seemed like there were constant updates coming through, and I haven't seen many in a while. I saw one, I think probably, I'm going to guess a week or so ago that came through, but they have kind of slowed down. You're correct there. But the thing is we talked about this on Biddle too. We always do distro challenges. I can't remember exactly where the conversation went, and you may recall this. We did talk briefly about the idea of maybe, instead of just reviewing distros all the time, maybe reviewing some of these applications too, which I don't think would be a bad idea, because that would help get the awareness out there for these too. Because I've seen some comments already in the YouTube chat that, like Rose had said, she never heard of it. So, I mean, maybe there needs to be more conversation about these apps too. And I think you doing this in itself is a start, and there have been some others, but they're far and few between. And I think this is a good thing that you're doing, because you're talking not only about the app itself, but your experiences with it.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. So yeah, on their website, so this is cross-platform. There is a Windows 7 Plus, Mac OS X, or OS 10, sorry, 10.12 Plus. And then for Linux, there is the Ubuntu 18.04, Linux Mint 19 and later. It's a PPA. There's a snap, there's an app image, there is an AUR package, Flatpak, Void Linux, and Debian. So they've pretty much got everything covered there. I mean, between the app image and the Flatpak, I mean, you can run it on literally anything. So, yeah, everyone can try it. And I mean, if you did the app image, it's probably a couple hundred megs, but it's not going to be that big of a deal. Set it to executable under the file properties and just run it, and it should be fine. I can't remember why the Flatpak worked better for me for some reason. I think it was just, there was something about it that just seemed to run a little better. And I generally use Flatpaks for most stuff anyway. So,
I just looked, actually, I have the PPA loaded in here. I wonder if that would, it shouldn't really hurt anything if I left the PPA in it with the Flatpak though, correct? I mean,
no, you would just have two entries. I mean, you'd have to know which one you were using, because Flatpak's going to add a menu entry as well.
Yeah, well, when I pulled the repo out, it seemed like it pulled it out of the menu. So the PPA is just sitting there. So I mean, I could get rid of it if I had to. It's probably not a big deal. But yeah, it does have a lot of different potential options on how you want to use it. I know that there's mixed feelings about all of them. This, whether somebody likes snaps, doesn't like them, whatever. To me, I know there's a lot of frustration with the size of these, but when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, even the Flatpaks, I mean, they're really not. They're a minute size, even in their larger size compared to when you used to load a program on Windows. You'd be taking up gigs of space with some of the programs you load on there. So, I mean, 600-700 megabytes. Yeah, it can be a little frustrating when you see, if you're running just a repo that's a fraction of that, but I don't think it's that huge of a deal, especially with the size of a lot of the storage we have nowadays.
Yeah, and Flatpak suffers from a lack of understanding of how containerized systems work. And I mean, I do a lot of server stuff, and so I mean, Docker and stuff like that on servers. Like containers to me make perfect sense. I mean, when I spin up a WordPress instance, let's say, I mean, it's got to go get Apache and Nginx and MySQL and like all the different, those are all different containers. And if I don't already have them installed, guess what? It has to go download them and install them. That's the way that works. And Flatpak is exactly the same way. It has different dependencies that it relies on. And so when I install Olive or, whatever other program I'm installing in Flatpak, the first time I do, it's got to go get the dependencies. But the next program I install that uses the same dependencies, it's just reusing them and it just needs the program. Or if there's a new version of the program, but the frameworks are the same, I just need to get the program. I don't need all of the other stuff. And that's just how containers work. And you either understand and agree with that in a desktop sense, or you don't. Like the complaint about them being too big doesn't, that if that's your perception, then you probably don't want to use them because that's how it works, and it will never not work that way. And if you understand that the first time you download something, it's going to have to pull those dependencies, and then it can then treat them independently, which is what you want it to do. That's why it's special and interesting. Then it's amazing and cool that it exists. So I love Flatpaks because they do exactly what I expect software to do now from my experience on servers. So the fact that it's on the desktop is fantastic. But if you don't like that and you see it as being a negative thing, then great. Use a snap, use an app image, use the native package. Like, it's cool. But just when I hear people are like, they're so big, it's just, yes, they are. You're absolutely right. And I cannot argue that point. But that isn't the point of why they exist in the first place. So anyway, it's something that I could go on for hours and hours, because every day I see someone like, Flatpaks are terrible because they're so big. And it's like, yes, they are. So
I consider them an avenue of getting something if you can't get it somewhere else.
That's fine. And that is the beauty of the situation we live in today, is that even just a few years ago, if you didn't have a native package, you either had to compile it from source or go somewhere and find it if it existed at all. And we now live in a world where we have snaps, Flatpaks, app images. And if you can't find what you're looking for between those three things and your distro's repository, I mean, that's 99% of software as far as what I've come across, right? At least mainstream stuff. So if Flatpaks is your fallback and you'd rather use snaps or you'd rather use app images, fantastic. That's it. Let's all be happy that these things exist and that they're available for us, right?
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way. I meant,
I know you didn't, Dan. I know you didn't.
It's another way to get a package you want to get.
Exactly. And
well, I like it
preference.
too, because it there's people like, same thing with rolling releases. There are users out there that want to stay with the latest and greatest, and with Flatpaks and snaps, you have more of that tendency to have the latest versions of it. Not saying that with the repos you're not getting updates, but you're going to get them slower.
So EB says there's so many cool apps on Linux, and I wonder how many of us really explore them. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I like to just go and check out, GitHub, GitLab, just check out what popular projects are out. I've found so many interesting utilities. That video clipping thing that I showed you, Jump Cutter, that's out on GitHub. It's just some guy in college that, he had a problem. He found a way to fix his problem. And then the beauty of open source is, I'll just put it out there and see if anyone else likes it. And it's funny because, I mean, there are some projects that will be hugely popular, and obviously they're, they get a lot of attention, but then you'll find a repo with like 3 stars, and it's this amazing tool that solves that problem that you have, right? And so it's amazing to you, maybe not to everyone else, and it works really well. And you're like, this is incredible. Like, why are there only 3 other people that, apparently find this useful? But that's the way this works. We all have our own special little things we do. And the fact that it's open source and someone says, I'll just stick it out there and see what happens. Like, I've fixed so many problems that way, just by taking the time to go and look for, a solution. And someone else has done the heavy lifting, right? Standing on the shoulders of giants and all of that.
Well, and that's why I say I mean, what were your thoughts on what I said earlier about us maybe looking at more of the apps or tools, for, I don't want to call them challenges, for experiences. We've done distro challenges. I guess it's the same thing, but to look at the tools that go along with Linux itself. And if Biddle's not the place for it, then maybe there needs to be a platform for it. I'm just curious what your thoughts were on that.
They've done a couple. So if you look back at the challenges, there actually are, it says distro challenge, but I'm pretty sure there were a couple that were actually,
yeah, we did a couple
software.
But that's what I'm saying. There were only a couple. I'm just wondering if now, especially when you get something new that comes out, maybe we should start to look at them when when something's released, or maybe if there's an update down the road.
I think that probably because it's Biddle, the idea of the distro challenge, because it's so universal, we're all using Linux of some type, so everybody at least has some awareness or interest or something to say. Versus, not everybody's editing videos, or not everybody is, doing CAD like Nate, or, different. We're all doing different things on our systems. I think it's really cool that we find the things that we find that we're interested in, and that we would be able to surface them and make sure people know they're out there. Because, again, there's so many times when I'll try to find a tool, and for whatever reason, I never find the best solution first, almost never, right? And that's, DuckDuckGo, Google, whatever search you're using, and that's just going out and doing your research, and you spend a couple minutes or half an hour, whatever time you invest in it, and you look at the top page or two of results. In so many cases, I don't find the right thing in that list. And so if I don't find it in a forum, or if I don't hear about it from someone else, or if I don't think maybe I should ask in Telegram, I don't find that thing. And then maybe months later, or even longer, somehow I've just stumbled across it in a forum post or something. It's like, why was that not shown to me? Like, why wasn't that something that's more popular or an option? Because this is exactly what I wanted. This is exactly, does just what I want it to do without doing any more or any less. And it's well maintained. It's not like it's a 10-year-old project that no one's even using anymore. That happens to me so frequently. So yeah, if there was a way for us to, I don't even discourse, like, it doesn't have to be an official part of the show if it's not something Rocco was interested in. But yeah, I see it as, that's a very valid thing to me. I love learning about new software, because even if it's something I don't use all the time, it's still interesting, right? Especially if it's open source, and all the things we love about what we're into. Like, hey, is this cool open source project that OBS is one of those, like, everyone uses OBS to stream, right? I know there's OBS, there's the Windows only version that's an OBS offshoot, and there's some other things out there, but the standard is an open source project OBS, right? And not everybody streams.
There was Streamlabs OBS, but I don't think that's going anywhere.
So, and not everybody streams, but I bet most people have at least heard of it by now, because the people who do use it are so vocal about the fact, like, I couldn't sit here and do this stream tonight without that software. There's probably ways I could use the YouTube thing, maybe. I don't have much faith that would be any good. I know there's probably some other ways I could do it. StreamYard, I don't really like, and some other stuff, but OBS makes it's kind of the same way, right? It does look daunting. It's a little challenging at first. It takes you a little bit of time to kind of get used to it. But then once you get your footing, you realize, okay, I can do everything I want to do very simply without a lot of extra effort. And then if I want to take it to the nth degree, this thing's going to let me do all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's a perfect example of this, just like open source project that was able to find its niche and then just dominate. And not dominate because they have millions of dollars in marketing, dominate because it's the right solution. It works. And they fix the problems that exist, and they keep making it better and better with each successive release. Blender is another one. There's so many projects like that I think of that are just, they're becoming the mainstream, that they're becoming what people use. And on the web side of things and software side, open source is really, that's a foregone conclusion. It's just like Linux on servers, right? That you don't even think about, like, of course this web project, this web library, whatever, of course it's open source, because it's just the way this works. So even if it's not something I use or might use, I still love hearing about those types of projects. So yeah, Joe, I don't know. I don't know what the right way to do it, and if maybe just bringing it up or.
Well,
or
maybe we
or...
do like a in the second hour. I mean, what? And I still don't know if there'd be enough time because, like, in the UK with their last little meetup thing that went on out there, 2 weeks in a row, unfortunately ran out of time because we're talking about other things and Zeb didn't get a chance to talk about it. Is it OggCamp, if I'm saying that right? So maybe it comes down to just like a software corner or a software mention of the week. And we talk, if there's time, we talk about it for 15 minutes or whatever, or you just, you mention it and you say, go to Discourse, and then there'll be a thread in there. And then they can direct maybe to channels like yours or others who have done, videos on these too. There's always a way, I think, to get them over there. But I think mentioning it is a start in itself, even if it doesn't spawn a huge conversation, or if maybe there's not enough time. Let's say it does spawn a conversation, but yet we're limited on time. You get at least the start of it going, and because that's kind of what the second hour is for. It's just depending on the topic. Sometimes there's some very in-depth topics, and then you don't have time for something else. But and then maybe it comes down to just simply putting it in the notes on the bottom of the video. Sending them over to Discourse that way. I mean, there's always a way, I think, to do it. And I agree with you with the challenges. Maybe that is not, because that might be, and that's why I say I couldn't remember exactly how that went. I remember there was one or two of them, like you just said. But I think, again, you stated a very valid point. Everybody has to be using it, or it's going to be boring, or it's going to be disinteresting to anybody that's not. But I do think that if you mention different things, kind of like topics, or when a new software comes out and it's been first looked, or that kind of, however you want to approach it. But I do think maybe a mention is a start. And then that'll also utilize Discourse even more as well. And again, that's also a way, just like with putting links in the bottom of the videos that you do here, that people can scroll down and just click and look at stuff right away, that's a good start, but I think it's something that needs to seriously be considered.
Well, Dan, I know you do a lot of searching around and looking for different software. I mean, it sounds like something you'd probably be interested in too.
Yeah, I do dig around. I have an atrocious list of software, and I usually go and clean out a repository. And try and take a look at some of the software. Some of it's a little beyond what I'm going to use, and some of it's right in the area where I would like to have.
Yeah. Well, you're always very thorough, and I appreciate that whenever you give feedback on the on the distros and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, maybe we just sort of kick up a couple conversations in Discourse and see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm more geared towards multimedia type applications, like for music, and I don't do any streaming, so video's not really quite in my realm.
No, that's fine. But that's I think that's Joe's point, right? I mean, everybody's going to have different interests, but I think we all use things and then don't really, and not that we have to evangelize or be overly vocal, but I know I use a huge set of programs all the time. A lot of them we're all using, Discord and like the Telegram and just the social stuff. Web browsers, we're all using the same kind of stuff. And but like, music players and video, just the basic kind of stuff, day-to-day computing, but then also some of the more specialized things. I probably use a lot of things that maybe it would be interesting to someone else to know, how I use them, or like tonight. I mean, just this Olive editor. And so there's a whole list of videos and things that I plan on making at some point. And, I think hardware sort of falls into that too. I'm not a big gamer. And so a lot of the stuff around hardware tends to focus on gaming. And so I'm usually not as interested because of it. But for audio, for example, one of the big things that I've done recently was just the amount of time I've spent on messing around with audio and trying to get Pulse Audio to work and all that stuff. And so I finally broke down and bought a little mixer, and it's one of the cheapest ones you can get. And it's just a very modest little Behringer, one input, it's my XLR mic, and it's, USB, and, it's got basic channels and mixing and stuff on it, but I can do a lot with it. And it solves a lot of the problems I was having with Pulse Audio. And I think that, yes, there are probably 10 videos out there already on that thing that have, hundreds of thousands of views. And does me making a video actually add anything to the conversation? Most of those are not, none of them are focused on Linux. So maybe that's sort of why that would be interesting to someone else. And so I plan on at some point, explaining how I got to where I was and how I sort of arrived at the conclusion that this was a solution for me, and how I've been happy with it. And it has fixed most of the problems I was having. And so that's, hardware specific, but I think software falls into that same category. And it's all about, we use Linux because we want control of our systems, and we want to be able to make it our own. And so if there's a piece of software that lets us do that, it's probably interesting to someone else. And, you don't have to make a video about it. You don't have to make a podcast about it. But if you want to say something on Telegram, or you want to say something in Discourse or on Biddle during the second hour, something like that, like it is a fair point, and it's maybe something where we're not doing a good job of right now.
Yeah, there are some things with software like Clementine. It's very popular. People love to use it, but very few people know that there's a fork of Clementine called Strawberry that's a much lighter edition, but it has much fewer features.
And I have heard of it, and I may have even taken a quick look at it. But yeah, that's exactly that type of thing. Like maybe just a thread about, hey, what? So there was a thread on the DLN Discourse about podcast apps, and like what you use on your phone to, download and listen to podcasts. And 2/3 of them I had never even heard of. Some of that is because app stores are abysmal for searching, because you're going to get product placements and people that are paying to be placed. And once you get down to the organic results, like, you're still not going to get the best. Again, like I was saying, you rarely ever find the right thing the first time. And so it turns out that someone had suggested Pocket Casts, which wasn't not in this. It was there. I just wasn't seeing it as being, there's so many choices that it wasn't standing out as one of the ones that might've been interesting. And so I tried it, and I really liked it because it did everything I wanted it to do. And one of the ways that I listen to podcasts now is I love the idea of silence skipping. So you saw me talk tonight about a lot about cutting silence out of my videos. I want to listen to podcasts like that too. I don't like listening to it sped up, because then I feel like I'm missing things. And so what that does is the same thing as Jump Cutter, is to take out the silence. And so you'll be able to listen to a podcast without those pauses, but in real time, technically. And so you're not speeding it up and missing it, and clipping it, making it sound really, really jittery. And so it had that. And it also has a web player that synchronizes. So if I listen to it in my browser, then when I go to my phone, it picks up where it was. And there's a free version, and it does a lot of this stuff for free. And then there's I think it's $10 a year for the paid version. So I used it for a couple of days, and I'm like, this is exactly what I want. So you know what, developer, you earned my $10. Here you go. And I found the right solution for me, because that thread on DLN Discourse, that's exactly what we did. We talked about all of the dozens and dozens of options. And that one, because I'd never heard of it, all of a sudden now I had a great solution. So Anyway, all right, let's check in on the chat. It's been a while. All right, EB. I may have already missed you, but thanks for stopping by. It is 3:17 a.m. in London right now. So EB was burning the 3 a.m. oil, I suppose.
I'd like to, if you don't mind, reiterate something too, that there was some of the discussion that was in the after show the other night, just about when people have concerns about things, instead of just stating they don't like something or there's something that is wrong with it or whatever, there needs to be specifics, because it doesn't matter whether it's a distro, whether it's an app, anything that you use within this. I mean, the only way that it's going to get fixed is sorting the problem. And it's not just talking about necessarily the problem you're having, but attaching maybe the idea of your hardware. That's why, I don't think it's a bad idea when, Ubuntu or some of these other distros now are asking for you to opt in so they could collect the information on your system, because that's in theory what they're doing. So they could see what type of hardware this is being used on. And it's the same thing for the apps as well. They can see that too. And it's a concerted effort in order to make things better. So, and the reason why I bring this up again is, talking about Olive or whatever. I mean, if there's experiences like this, in order to make it better, they need to know what the issues are. It's kind of like when I was in business. We all like the pats on the back when something goes well. But I used to tell people, if there's something that's wrong, I need the negative, if not more important, because I can't fix a problem if I don't know about it.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, I think that it is important. So I mean, the fact. Listen, and I think a lot of people said this, but the fact that we have that avenue and that channel of communication. I mean, I'm not trying to be like a fanboy or something, but I mean, Martin Windpress is now the head of the Ubuntu desktop group, right? He was sitting on a stream with us at 2:00 in the morning, his time, listening to, who am I, right? Like, I'm just some guy, right? That happens to use Ubuntu. I've used it since the beginning. We've been using it for 15 years. So it's not like I don't have some kind of, understanding and ability to articulate things to someone like him. But his focus and his responsibility and all that stuff, the fact that he'll come and take the time to do something like that and listen to the end user in that way. I mean, if you don't see that as being an incredible thing, you really don't understand how software development and commerce and like how this stuff works. Because I think it was you that said, good luck talking to Microsoft unless you take your credit card out. I mean, that for-profit companies, I mean, that's why they do it, right? And it's irresponsible business for them to give things away, which is why this whole argument around like Microsoft loves Linux and like how disingenuous it is. Yeah, of course it is, because it's marketing. Marketing is disingenuous. It's, and I'm not trying to be an absolute cynic there. We all buy things because we need them and we need to know what choices we have. And so it has its place, but Microsoft loves money and always will. And that's their motivation, and Linux makes them money now. So they're going to say things like that. I don't begrudge them for it, because of course they will. But the fact that, the person who can actually affect change, the person will come and sit on a stream with 20 random Linux users and listen to some of us be really nice about it, and some of us be not so nice, and some of us be really vague, or some of us be very specific. If you don't see that as being something amazing and special, then there's nothing I can say to you to convince you otherwise, because that is unheard of. It is that. And even, like I said, from a distro standpoint, like no other distros that I'm aware of do that. I mean, they have communities and they have outreach, and yeah, and like Manjaro, you can talk to the main guys on the forum, and you know, Mark Greaves with Peppermint. I mean, there are definitely community people who are out there and you know want that kind of feedback and stuff. But I mean, it is absolutely incredible the amount of engagement that they do. So yeah, I'm not sure I even had a real point there other than to just say like that's incredible to me. You know, it's and I've known who Alan Pope is and these other guys like for a long time, but because I wasn't part of the community, I didn't have that connection. And now it's like I talk to Alan at least twice a week now, just randomly on Telegram or wherever. And it's not because I even have necessarily like I want anything or I have a problem. Like I just like I know him now and I can just say, "Hey man, how's it going?" Or I had a question about this, or I just had this thought. Like, have you guys thought about this? Or and I know he's busy and I don't want to bug him, but he, you know, he enjoys it. He said last night, whenever I contacted him last night and I was having that issue, and he's, you know, that made his day that he was able to help me. Or I mean, I believe him when he says that, and so that encourages me to keep doing it, whether he likes it or not. You know, he says he likes it.
Well, it's that sense of accomplishment that that a problem was fixed by that method of just simply asking a question or stating you had an issue. And I feel the same way you do. It's not just about those guys, but it's about, I mean, EB, you know, all the guys. I mean, basically everybody that we watch. It was a few years ago when I was just anybody else sitting out in an audience watching these guys, you know, Zab, everybody, anybody that put stuff out. I was just sitting in the background like any other person, just watching these things. To the point now we're friends at some level, and it's the same thing. Like we said, you're talking about like Marty. I mean, God, I used to watch, you know, a Linux Action show, you know, with Chris and them, and or you see their different streams that they were doing, and oh my God, it was just the voices are so recognizable, and that's how long ago. To think these people had no clue who any of us were, and now because we're involved in this, they've put a face with, you know, who we are, and like you said, they're open. They're it goes to show that they're just as human as the next guy or any of us, you know, and it's mind-blowing to think that, you know, you could sit there and ask for help and just about instantaneously get it from just about anybody, and especially people of that level who are right in the core of creating these things. It is. I mean, you couldn't, unless you knew somebody that worked there or had a family member that worked there at Microsoft, you're never going to get necessarily even close to that response. I believe firmly. I mean, it used to be, I mean, that's the way of the world now too. You don't know where you're calling anymore for technical support half the time because they outsource it and that kind of thing. I mean, here you're talking right to the source, no pun intended.
No, absolutely. Right. And it's not even just giving feedback. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I reached out to Alan because I was having an issue, and I did it because not expecting him. And I even said to him in my chat, like, I'm not asking you for help necessarily. I'm just curious, like, what do I do here? Where do I go? And he took ownership, right? I mean, he just grabbed it and said, I'm going to help you with this, and he did. And so it was just that to me is something really incredible.
Well, if you really want to have an experience, stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and have them jump into a game with you, like Ballistic Overkill or something. So it goes to show you how real people they are. You know?
Well, because we have these people in our community and we've gotten to know them really well from Canonical, I feel more comfortable turning the telemetry on in my computer so they can see what I have, and then they'll get all the bug reports. And that's community, you know.
Well, Eric, wasn't it your situation that he was specifically talking about, Alan, with the timestamp of when you had the issue? I think it was yours, right? When you were talking about, because you said you were watching videos or something like that, and that kind of information, sending a bug report, that's where that's critical, sending it, because they can see what you were doing, where you were at as far as your hardware and that kind of thing. It's not spying on you. They're looking at specifics for the use case, which told them leaps and bounds, which ultimately led to the solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, I get that people could find that to be like you're saying, Dan, like maybe it's a little scary to folks that you know, there is an amount of information that can be gathered about you to fingerprint your system. It was surprising to me to know that they have that, but that's, you think about it from their standpoint, they're not doing it to track you, right? They're not doing it to watch your behavior. They're doing it because if your system, if you send that bug report, right, if your thing pops up, or if you turn on automatic bug reporting, because you can do that as well, they have to be able to correlate those events together. So when he showed me that he could see all of the different things that my system had, you know, all of the ones that I had sent over the last, you know, it was about a month, I think. It was great because I was able to see it. And like he said, in Unity, there was a button that you could just click to see all of that. And so in one-off things, you don't necessarily think like, has this happened before? Because a lot of those are very esoteric, and like, you don't, I don't know what random package was at fault, or in the stack trace and all that stuff. But when you can see it in aggregate and see all of them together, it becomes a picture of what's going on with that system, particularly if it's like a hardware thing, like, or if there's something that's happening on an ongoing basis or repeatedly, then you know, like he said, they trend that stuff, right? So now it's not just my system, but if there's an issue with a package or something like that, they can see that and then respond to it. But also then for me specifically, if I'm having an issue ongoing, like an audio driver, or it's like something is specific to my system, I can now see that it keeps happening over and over again. And if I wasn't able to sort of see it in that framework or in that way, then I might not make those connections. And so it's useful to me, and also very useful to them, to be able to have that information and be able to then track it, trend it, use it. And if I come to them and say I'm having this issue, and they're able to look at all of the things that I've submitted in total, and then do sort of a holistic view of like what's going on in this guy's system, all of a sudden now they have an insight that they couldn't possibly have otherwise. So yeah, it's very important to be able for them to get that, because I mean, think about it from their situation. We're just a bunch of random users with varying hardware and varying systems and situations and software that's installed and all the rest of it. And if we report a bug, they ask us for a certain amount of information, which we already feel like is burdensome in many cases, because the bug reports can be tricky. I mean, it's a lot of work to fill them out properly. And, so if there's a way for them to gather that information, or, have access to all of the things that they need to put together. I mean, I know as a technician, when I did it for a living, it very rarely is the surface value presentation of whatever's happening on the system the actual cause. It's a symptom, right? It's just like being sick. Like you're presenting with a symptom, but the underlying cause is usually much more complicated or less obvious. And so when I would try to fix a computer problem, the user would tell me the things that they themselves are experiencing, but it was my job to then dig underneath of that and figure out like, okay, and I'm sure Joe and you as a builder, the same thing with structural issues and stuff like that. Like they may see a crack in the wall. That doesn't mean that wall is bad. That probably means the foundation's bad, or there's some other sort of, underlying issue that's causing it. And so if you can't get to the root of the issue, then you can't fix the problem. So
Well, and that's absolutely right. It's basically the structure is only as sound as the foundation underneath it. And the difference, the huge difference, the most important difference on the information they gather is they're not doing it to sell you something. They're doing it to try to fix a problem. And also by studying the hardware that the users have, the individual users, helps them determine what things need to be not only built into the distros, but it also helps the kernel developers as well. Just like we talk about AMD with, you know, the graphics being built into the kernel now and that kind of sort of thing. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's not just all about new hardware too. It's about, you know, hardware that might be a couple, 3 years old by now, but it's still newer hardware, that kind of thing. There's so many different devices, so many different types of hardware. And yes, you're not going to appease every single piece of hardware out there, but the idea is if you could see, again, like you mentioned, not only for the problems, but the trending of the type of hardware being used, that also helps them geared toward or focus on developing what they need to have it work better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's unfair of us sometimes to experience problems and then just be like, oh, this is buggy and, you know, what a mess.
Well, you know, and I mentioned it too in the after show, you know, and I'm going to say this, it's not anything horrible, but people can be selfish and not necessarily meaning to. It's just, you know, you want to have your things work the way you want them to work. And it's like, well, why aren't they fixing it? Or why did they do this? And, you know, the only way to find those answers or get those answers is to reach out and ask and say, hey, I've got this concern going on and I need to, you know, have whatever we call it workflow a lot or whatever your use case is. And perhaps you'll get the answer you want and perhaps you won't, but at least you more than likely will get an answer.
Yeah. And it's also easy a lot of times what seems like such an obvious problem to a lot of us. And when we encounter it, I know I do this a lot where it's like, how did they miss that? And it just seems so straightforward. But what I realize is maybe I'm using it in a very unconventional way, which I tend to do, or maybe, you know, again, my specific hardware or setup or something like that makes it makes a unique situation that they just didn't encounter. And the other thing is that QA testing, and Zeb can tell you this, is it's very involved, it's very specialized, and it's not something that's just you just happen to do. Like it takes planning and effort, and it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work, and it's tough for projects that are already sort of, you know, they've got the development help they have. Those people are doing the work they can do, and you know, most of the work that they produce is very high quality. But when you build something, especially from like a software perspective, and Kevin could probably also, you know, tell us more about this, but you can either spend your time focused on one bit of minutia and making that, you know, flawless and optimized and fail proof and all of that, or you can look at the whole project and then rough in all the different pieces. I mean, there's different approaches to the way that you do it. I mean, I think from my perspective, it makes more sense to look at it from a 10,000 foot view and say, what is it what is it this thing's supposed to do? Get all of those pieces plugged in, and then you come back and you do a pass at like optimizing it so that it runs better, or, you know, cleaning up the code or whatever. And then you come back and you sort of do all these sort of tasks and steps of developing it, but you're doing it on your machine and maybe the other computer that you have sitting there. And then you put it out in some state, and then maybe some other people test it on the systems that they have. And so now you've got a handful of different systems, but ultimately you aren't going to get a like huge testing, you know, effort completed just through that normal sort of software development channel. QA is a dedicated process that has to happen outside of that, just like documentation and a lot of other things, for that to all sort of come out as packaged, like fully vetted software. And, you know, it's just not how most of this stuff is built and works. It all, you know, they do a really good job of making sure it doesn't crash or eat your data or do something that it really just shouldn't do. But in terms of the optimizations or the bugs that sneak in, like, all software has bugs, right? It just is the nature of the beast. And most of them are minor, fortunately, and go unnoticed until that one person finds that one situation where, you know, they found the bug. And then it's up to us to report the bug and give the feedback, and hopefully the bandwidth is there to address the problem.
Well, another controversial thing too that Alan brought up was the, you know, having the updates turned on by default. I mean, the beauty of Linux is, yeah, you can update when you feel you're ready to, that sort of thing. But they had basically documented and reviewed that there was such a large scale for such a long time that people hadn't done that their systems were vulnerable, that this was, in their opinion, the better choice. Now, yes, he said you can toggle it off, but he was believing it was 60 days max, because I remember there was discussion, I believe, in the YouTube chat with Mark Reeves about it. And it might not be a popular decision, you know, that people will like. To me personally, I can't stand looking at the blue badge up there. When I see there's an update, I look at it, I review it, I see what it is, and I go with it, because I don't want to have issues, and especially when there's security issues out in this world are getting more and more intense, and so many more of them. So personally, I don't have a problem with that. I think the reason there's a phobia about this is because of Microsoft's, you know, methods of how they were doing things with their operating system, and how it breaks so many things, and the fact that they are data mining and they're always looking into there for other reasons. And so you've got people, there's a paranoia that has come with that. And I think that's the natural assumption that Linux is doing the same thing. Now, I think if they ever found out that they did do something like that, you know yourself, when there's been a couple of things that have been less than scrupulous in the Linux environment, it's been dealt with, and rapidly and harshly.
Absolutely. And that's that's peer review, that's open source, the ability for other people to look at, you know, the code and see what's happening. And it's not a perfect system, because the reality is there's only so many people with the expertise to truly evaluate what's going on. But I think there are enough people, and particularly on the larger projects, that, yeah, that kind of stuff, it's tough to get away with shenanigans in an open source because of that, right? Because there is at least the capability for people to be able to review code, and also it's how you conduct yourself, right? I think there's that you have like when people say, this is a good example. So when people submit packages, right, developers in open source projects, they have the permissions and the ability to merge code into the branches. And then ultimately that code then gets out to users. Now, some of those users have very high level privileges, and they're in positions where if they were unscrupulous or for some reason, they could do a tremendous amount of damage, because they have the keys to the castle, or keys to the kingdom, right? But because of their pattern of behavior over many, many years and decades, in some cases, these are trusted individuals who have earned that trust through their actions. And so even that level of it, right, you have this amount of trust that's happening, and it's trust based on actual merit, versus the process by which you're buying a piece of software from a company who presumably is hiring, you know, quality people who know what they're doing. But ultimately it's up to that one company and their processes, their internal checks and balances, to put out safe, usable software. And we have to just trust that that's happening. Whereas in the open source world, that's all in public. Everybody sees it. You know whose key it is who signed that package, because you can see it. And then if you really care, you can go find out who that person is. And if you don't agree with it or don't like that, or for whatever reason, you have the choice because you have the information. It's there for you. And that is a 100% difference between those two things. I have no idea who developed any of the software that I'm buying or that I'm using as some web service that is an open source. And for anything that's open source, you absolutely know those things because it's there. Those packages are signed, the release notes, the build, all that stuff the people who did that work is there. And in most cases, they have their contact information as well, which is kind of crazy. But there's an email address. There's some way to actually even get in touch with them. So it really levels that that field.
The other thing that's sad about human nature, we had, again, part of the same discussion in the after show. One of the comments made by one of the people in there with us was, if it bleeds, it leads, is the phrase said about the news media personnel. And when you know yourself, I had brought up too at one time about when Linux Mint's website was hacked. It was a foolish thing. Yes, they had a weak password. Yes. But holy cow, even to this day, you still get some people that jump all over that like it's the big crucible thing that, put a stake in its heart, it's done, that kind of thing. And it's not. I mean, there are mistakes made. There are bugs. There are things out there. Getting them fixed is what should be focused on. And what's good about things should be, I think the attention should be more focused on. And yes, discussions like these, so often we have discussions in some of the shows or platforms about all the things that are wrong with something. And unfortunately, I think that sets the precedent sometimes for the views being that a negative connotation of what it is you're trying to really get across. They don't, especially if you get somebody that's new to your platform or visiting your channel and they see a discussion like that, it could potentially turn somebody off or new users off because they're not sure what, where you're coming from. All they see is all this, what they may perceive as negative talk, when in fact they don't realize you're trying to correct or help correct problems by your experiences. So that's why, as much as there's talk about concerns or issues, that's why a lot of us, when we do these reviews, we do discuss not only maybe the bugs or the experiences we had that weren't so great, but then we talk about the good things, the positive part of it too, because it's not all a bad experience. The majority of the time, it's a positive experience with some minor issues. Although there have been, I don't know if I could count on one hand in the last few years now that we've been doing BITL, how many distros we've really come down hard on. I know Antigros was one, which, because I know, and it's only because it comes to mind, not that I'm saying because Ryan's in the chat right now, because he caught a lot of razzing for that one. It was basically his recommendation for a challenge, and we really razzed him for that one. But the truth of the matter is there was a lot of issues with that distro at that time, and I have seen a lot more positive things coming out since then of people who have experienced it. And I do think that perhaps maybe that show was a little bit a part of that too, that maybe they took it to heart and looked a little harder at it or whatever they did. So, and then sometimes it's just like, we haven't heard a lot of discussion about it as of late. Things tend to go away. Sometimes some of these distros, unfortunately, will fall by the wayside. Other ones won't, and they'll advance. So yes, Ryan, I see you.
Yeah. It's funny because I had a lot of issues with Antergos myself. I mean, just because you mentioned it, but I think the reason that it's hard for me to come down to be too critical is that a lot of open source projects or distributions, especially the smaller ones, they may have really good ideas, but difficulty executing. And a lot of that comes down to just manpower and the fact that it's not intent. It's not, there's no, they don't have the manpower to execute the ideas that they have, but they have really great ideas. I think of something like Farron OS, that's one guy. And I know there's some people that help him, but for the most part, like it's literally Farron, he is the one that drives all of that. And, he makes a tremendous amount of change and does so much work. And the things he does are really interesting. They're things that no one else is doing, at least not in the way that he's doing them. So is it for everyone, or will everyone benefit from those things? Does everyone care about theming as much as Farron does? I don't, probably the answer is no in some cases, but ultimately to me, it's really special because he's doing something different. And I feel like those ideas do have an influence on other projects and other systems. And if you look at things like, I'm not a huge fan of Elementary personally, and I'm not just picking them out of nowhere. I'm just saying they're a very popular distribution. They do a lot of really, really cool things. I'm just petty and I don't like Pantheon. So, sorry. But it doesn't mean that I don't see the merit and that I don't find it to be very, very intriguing, because not only do they do something different on the desktop, but they do something different with their App Center. They're giving developers an opportunity to earn some money. They are making changes on a regular basis, so they're committed to their project. And, and you can say that about so many different distributions, Zorin and, and all the bigger ones, Mint and Ubuntu and Fedora, and they all do something slightly different, and we all benefit because the melding of ideas that happens because of that is, that's the crucible where all these good ideas are born, right? And some small idea that someone had, or a project that someone had, and maybe it only went to a certain degree, but someone else saw that and thought that was a really smart idea. I think we should take a look at that. What would that take to get that in? Or they made a change and that fed back upstream to some other project, which is so often the case that a distribution will use an upstream package, make a fix to it, submit those patches, and then those somehow get into the main system. So it all has merit. So I've heard a lot of people complain like, oh, well, Biddles, they're so soft on everybody and they're never critical, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I just think that a lot of us recognize that the problems that we may have with something, or the things we might not like about something, are not that they don't have merit, but they're not. It's not like it's not an issue with the system, right? It's more of like our reaction and what we value or like, or how we use something. So, okay, you don't like GNOME, or you don't like something. Like, we can exist in a world where just because I don't like something and I won't use it doesn't mean that, one, I can't appreciate it for being something that actually has merit, and two, that somehow I have to go and say that it's bad, or no one else should use it because I don't like it. Like, it's a juvenile. It's almost like I'm one of those weird sports people where, like, if I go to a sporting event and I see people boo at the other team, like I went and watched a Lightning game one time, and they were playing the Capitals, and Alex Ovechkin, and for people who don't know hockey, forgive me, but he's one of the greatest players that have ever played the game of hockey. And they booed him. And I'm just like, he's one of the best players that has ever played this sport. And just because he's on the other team, you're like, boo! Like, that is such an juvenile, asinine response, in my opinion. Like, I know I'm maybe not the typical person, but like, I respect the other team. I respect that they're good players. I respect that they're going to challenge us and give us a good game. Like, I don't have to dislike them. I can like my team and still like the other team and still want my team to win, and not have to like demonize someone else. So whatever, that's a completely ridiculous tangent, but I see it so much, and that's the whole tribalism thing. And I just see it so much in the Linux world. And it makes me want to just sometimes, like, I just shake my head, because I hate GNOME. You hate GNOME? You hate GNOME. You hate it. You care so much about it that you hate it. Like it did some horrible thing to you and your family and someone you love. Like you hate it. Do you realize what that word means? Like it's just so silly. Like you don't like it. I get it. Don't use it.
I actually said that on Biddle one night. And I wish to this date I could take it back.
It's okay, and it's just language, right? We all, like Joe, you said you said something on your Linux Spotlight that you wish you didn't. I say things I wish I didn't say every day of my life. I have this is a personal thing. My mother-in-law, I have always said this the most stupid, ridiculous things to that woman, completely unintentionally, just because I'm an idiot, because I'm dumb and I'm probably nervous around her or something. But it never fails that every time, not every time, but a lot of times, and especially when I'm saying something really stupid, she just happens to be the person that either is there or that I'm saying it to. And over the years, I've known her for 25 years now. And I can just think like of all of the idiotic things I've said to her. And it's so dumb. I don't know why. And so we all do it, but and I'm not saying like, oh, you made a mistake one time. It's the people that are just continuously, like Alan was saying, where you come to the Ubuntu forum and you say you don't like Ubuntu or you hate Ubuntu. Like why? What are you doing there? Why are you doing this? You know, if you have feedback or criticism or I don't like it because, like, that's one thing. But like, you know, it sucks. Like,
well, and that's like last night, you know, I took the opportunity, even though I drew attention to myself, and more than once, only because I did feel bad. It's not the worst thing in the world that I said. You know, when I was reviewing, I told Martin, I said, I love Mate, I always have. But I used and I could have chose a better word, and it's not so strong. But I said, you know, it's kind of getting ugly. You know, it's been around for a while, and that was not probably the best choice. It was just, you know, something that I thought could use, you know, maybe outdated or freshened up. So it wasn't the worst thing in the world that I said. But like Dan just said, it's one of those things that maybe I wish I could have taken back, because, like I said, I try to remember that there are people behind this, and good people. What I said on Spotlight was misspeaking about the year of the first distro I used. And it's amazing that somebody did hone in and target it. And I knew that was going to happen. It didn't bother me. I mean, it did and it didn't. You know, I mean, in the sense it wasn't the worst thing in the world, because immediately there was a post underneath that said, I believe he probably meant this. And then, of course, I elaborated on it too, which it was. I said I had a senior moment or whatever. But, you know, when you're sitting in a hot seat, so to speak, you know, like I said, I am not unfamiliar with public speaking, but when you know you're sitting there being recorded, you want to make sure those slip ups don't happen, because I'm not the guy on the other end editing the video, you know? And so honest mistakes are just that. And if you notice in the Spotlight, there is only one splice that I noticed that he did. And that's because I literally got tongue twisted, you know, talking about BleachBit. I don't know why. I normally on the other time never do, but I did. I couldn't spit it out. You know? So it took 2 or 3 times, and I knew he'd probably cut that out. But, you know, unless you're sitting in that position or having that. So I'd like to think, you know, where Biddle's concerned, overall, you know, everybody on there does a reasonably decent job. You know, everybody's had their experiences. But like you said, even look at Thomas with his Drager OS. I mean, it's what I see in a lot of these, the community and a lot of these personalities of people is one common thread, which I feel myself is it's called passion, you know, and the level of passion is what drives the different people for what they do. You know, some of them are just, they love it for, like I do. I mentioned it in my Spotlight. I said, you know, the one thing that has come for me with Linux is that it's the one thing that I have a choice. You know, there are so many things in this world you cannot choose, you know, and this is the one thing that was given to me by a bunch of fabulous people out there that have given their time and their hard work, you know. So the other thing that's come out of it are the friendships, you know. And is this community perfect? No, nothing is. but it's the percentages. When you look at the percentages of the good side versus, you know, the bit of drama or hiccups or whatever. But that's one of the things I liked about this community, because it doesn't feel like there's a ton of drama in here. Yes, there's moments, but the reality of it is there's a striving goal that I see for most everybody that's here, is they all want to see this succeed and get better. And yeah, I'm watching those two, and I'm trying to keep.
It's like we're trying to have a serious conversation. I'm reading these goobers talking about, like, that is a classic comment. I hate hockey. I've learned nothing. There you go. And oven chicken is
that's
delicious.
because Ryan's a hockey puck at times. He can't help himself.
Oh my goodness!
I love you, Ryan.
The two of you. And oh yeah, you're 6 hours late for DL. Don't think for a second whenever you said that you were two hosts down that I wasn't like, uh-oh, time to get ready.
No, this is really fun. I mean, it's just you know, it's funny thing is I haven't seen Michael or Ryan in quite some time, so it's fabulous to see them in here. And hey, you guys, why don't you jump into Discord and for a couple minutes? Hello, Mrs. Adams.
Yeah, if you want to harass us, we're on Biddle Discord down in the live now. It's up to you. You've probably harassed enough people for one day.
Guys, I need to hop off. It's my bedtime.
All right, Dan. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me. You too, Joe. Take care.
Have a great night. I got to step away for just a minute here, Eric. I got to go get something to drink. I'm getting a little dry, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, my goodness. She does, Rose. She takes good care of me. I'm not sure whether I deserve it or not, honestly. She's, I said this on my Linux Spotlight, like, you know, if you're lucky in this life, you find that person that you're meant to be with. And she chased me down when I was about 21, I think. And she wouldn't take no for an answer. I had no interest in a girlfriend at the time. And she just was like, no, you're gonna, you will submit. And here I am 24 years later. And yeah, I couldn't imagine my life without that person, no doubt. She's amazing. Makes me a much better person, I can tell you that. I tell her this all the time. I would have like been living in a trailer park somewhere by myself, you know, some menial job. Because I feel like when I met her, I was like, oh, here's this like really great person. I should probably do better. I should like get a real job and you know, stop hanging out with my dumb friends, and not, you know, completely, but you know, I should probably think about the next year instead of the next day. So it's been a good thing for me, no doubt. But hey, remember when I was talking about Olive like an hour and a half ago? Like, and I showed you 10 minutes of it. I don't know if anybody had any interest in that or not, but that was the premise of this, was I was going to do some video editing, and I did a little, and then we got sidetracked, as we always do. So anyway, yes, if you it's Joe. If you haven't tried Olive, please do. It's worth your time. You can get it as a flat pack, an app image, PPA, lots of different ways. And it's worth at least giving it a try. And we've talked about so many things since then. I'm sort of lost and confused now. Doesn't help that I'm coming up on over 2.5 hours, I think. I'm not gonna. I can't reach Tanel levels of streaming. I'm sorry. Like I think it was 9-10 hours, or some ridiculous thing like that. I can't even imagine that.
That's what happens when you invite a long-winded Italian on your show. Sorry.
Oh, But see, Joe, I'm an honorary Italian. You've seen me. I've been talking. You know, I got my arms moving and stuff. My stepdad would be proud of me. He is 100%. It's funny. For years he had. So he's always been really hairy. You know, just sort of like stereotypical, and like I'd make fun of him. And but he had thinning hair for a long time on the top. And then just out of the blue one day, he shaved his head. And you know, that's kind of polarizing because some people look terrible with shaved heads and some people look like they should have always just never had, you know, hair. And he's one of those people that just looks like it's perfect, right? He's got, you know, good shape and it's no scars. Like he just kind of, and he looked so cool because before he just looked like a guy who was trying to hang on to the hair and like, you know, try to look young and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden he went from that to like cool, you know, he's got the goatee and he's like, he's got a thing now, you know, it's like nice. So anyway, but the honorary Italian part is like, I've was raised by a 100% Italian, like super Italian guy. And, so yeah, I feel like I have some cred there. No genetic cred, but at least the upbringing. And what's funny is we always joked because, you know, I'm 6'4" and he's, I don't know, 5'7", maybe 5'8". And like, so it'd be like, yeah, this is my dad. And they'd look at him, and they'd look at me, and look at him, and like, your dad, huh? Like, yeah, totally. That's my dad. We had a lot of fun with it.
I've always been told what a big guy I am, but if I stood next to you and Michael, I'd probably look short then because you're 2 inches taller than me, and I believe Michael's taller than me too. He's about your height, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, apparently Zeb's a big guy too, so yeah, it would be quite a collection, no doubt. Oh my goodness. Well, I think I'm not sure. I may have run the course of this stream. I'm glad I did it. I haven't done one in a very long time. And Adam actually suggested it because he said, we asked what I was doing earlier, and I told him I was editing video, and he's like, oh, why don't you stream it? So he gets credit for this. Anyway, well, guys,
6'4", but 6'7" with the hair.
See, talk about the hair. Here he is.
What did she want to come in? Oh, you want? Oh. I've been invaded by the cat. All right. Well, anyway, it is Sunday night at 11. I appreciate everybody.
Just when I joined. We're so rude.
Oh, no. Okay, never mind. I can't.
I'm kidding.
So,
you're doing a Barbara now. I see you got somebody there visiting you.
Oh, yeah. Well, she sits outside of the door and scratches and wants to come in, and then I let her in, and now she'll stand at the door and want to get out, which she's doing right now.
She looks just like my girl. She Maine Coon?
A little bit of Himalayan or not Himalayan, Norwegian, and then it's a little bit of Maine Coon. It's sort of a mix between the two, Norwegian forest and Maine. Super soft and fluffy. So
the best.
Oh yeah, she's great. She's not a very good cat, but she's beautiful. She's.
How many are there really good cats?
I've had a few, and that's the problem. Once you have a good one, it's just like a good dog. You know, once you have one that like you've melded with, you know.
Yeah, they spoil you.
Yeah, and then you end up with one like this. She's all looks and nothing else. I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, I've got 2 Maine Coons, and you guys have seen at least one of them, and you've heard the other one. I remember Adam kind of cracking up about the one because she doesn't really meow. She makes almost like a calling noise or a squeak noise. It's kind of funny. She doesn't meow like the regular typical cat. So, Michael, where you been?
What do you mean? Podcasting, all that good stuff?
I know, but it's been so long since we've been able to talk in person, it seems like.
That's true. I haven't been doing Biddle in a while for a multitude of reasons. Just not having time.
Life comes first. We all know that.
Yeah, also doing the network stuff. There's a lot to do with that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I just figured you were here to tell me to go get the stuff done I'm supposed to.
That's not what. Yes.
I figured. Actually,
no, I came in to make a joke. That's basically.
Okay. Well, I need a quick break. So Ryan said I should just ask you to tell us the virtues of plasma, and then I can.
Oh yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that. All right. So.
Wait, let me take my no dose first.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I listened to the Linux Lads podcast when you're on there. That was pretty excellent. Like you.
There you go.
Yeah, it was good because you did keep it at a, like, you were enthusiastic and you definitely brought up really good points, but you also sort of ratcheted it down just a little. So.
Yeah. I was being a little bit. I was also being, honest about. It is definitely great, but also there's problems, right? So I'm not going to pretend there's not. But I think I did pretty good on, like, trying to convey get the information from them about what their problem with it is. Because, there's so many times where people were like, talking at each other rather than talking to each other.
Yeah.
So, and I'm also, I admit I've done that before for sure. So I'm working on that.
I had to laugh. You gave the long, excellent explanation of like the legal system and the whole patent thing with GNOME and Shotwell. And at the very end, he's like, okay, well then he just like moved on. And I don't know if that was just like the way it was edited, but I thought it was just funny because you like went on, you explain everything. And then it was just like, all right, well, enough of that.
Yeah, I think they just edited it that way.
It was funny.
Because I remember it being like not as abrupt. I listened back to it too, and I was like, "Oh, okay," because I couldn't remember what I said about the system, so I was making sure I said it right, and it turns out I did. So, well, at least as much as I non-lawyer can.
Yeah, it's complicated, no doubt.
I just looked. I actually do like looking at law like cases for copyright and stuff every once in a while, and like trademark law. And there was this one case that is just hilarious that happened like a week or so ago. And it's been going on for like a year and a half, but the case was hilarious because it was this guy sued for copyright of this photo, but the person trying to use the photo was like searching for free, royalty-free stuff. And the reason why it was great is because it was just a city photo. And like, so it's really hard to tell if it's like an original photo or whatever. So they had like done due diligence, and they did it like a crazy level. They looked at metadata and all kinds of stuff. Like they actually put a lot of effort into teching, and they couldn't find any copyright for it. And so they used it and got sued and stuff. But the thing is, the lawsuit was over the grounds of royalty. And he said that I want $5,000 for the usage of it, but that the defender said no, but I'll give you $2,500, like pretty much immediately. And there's this particular case of like our piece of copyright law called Section 68 that allows you to do like attorney fees and stuff depending on the reaction. But it also it's regarding to offer system. So like whenever you make an offer, it changes the stuff. Anyway, to get the basics back, instead of going super long, what happens is this guy turns down the $2,500, then gets the case wins and gets only punitive damages of $200 because the punitive damages apply to whether this person did it on purpose or did as much effort as they could to kind of like avoid it. So if they did an honest, in good faith attempt to avoid it, they would only get the minimum, which is $200. Mm-hmm. So in overall, there was only $200. So then that person counterclaims the original copyright owner for court costs and stuff and attorney fees and wins. So instead of taking $2,500, the plaintiff, the copyright holder, now owes $1,200 to the guy he sued. It's so awesome.
I love it. That's fantastic.
It's like instant karma in law. Like, what?
Yeah, that's a feel-good law story that you don't normally get. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because what's great is that the person who did it had a lawyer that was like completely on it. Like, because the guy who took the photo was also a lawyer and thought that they could just take it over because of that. But the other one was like on it and said, as long as you make an offer, because like the section 68 implies like once an offer's been made kind of thing. So they made the offer for the $2,500 within like, I think 2 days or something. So any court costs or attorney fees after that are based on the section 68. So as soon as they lost, they had to pay because the guy kept pushing it. Like, because he actually offered them more money than they were going to get in the court. So it's just beautiful.
It is fantastic. Yeah, I have a pretty cynical viewpoint of law, but that is good to hear those kind of stories. So,
I mean, they're super rare, but when they happen, they're awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
Now, who let Michael on here?
Oh,
wait, who's this guy?
No, Ryan's here.
Oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me here. Yeah, we want to basically take this over. You can leave now, Eric.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, guys.
Oh my god!
You gave us very little time for us to prepare for this stream. So
yeah, where are my notes? By the way, what am I supposed to talk about?
Listen, you got more notice than I ever do, so it's not good.
That's true. You're not wrong.
Yeah, not really.
So, Eric, did you listen to DL today, and do you have any feedback for us? Anything you're going to talk negatively about on Destination Linux Extend?
You're right. And how can we change your mind?
Yeah, we want to change your mind before you get to your podcast.
Listen, my life is uncomplicated. Large bills, untraceable bank transfers.
So what's your PayPal email address?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, no, I was thrilled to have Bo on. And when you guys brought up VPNs, I was like, yes, I want to hear this. Like, this is perfect. So, and the way he uses them is exactly the way I use them. And the level of trust you have is it keeps, your ISP and it keeps those open wireless networks from being able to collect your information and kind of eavesdrop on you. And they have their place. So, I mean, it's great to have someone like him say something that I would have said about it with none of the authority that he would have. So,
oh, he's so much fun. Like at the local Linux group we have, he's just endless entertainment because if there's nothing else, we can just ask Bo to hack somebody there. And he does.
I didn't get a chance to say it in the show, but what I was thinking is you were like, and it was so great because when Bo was coming to the thing, you're talking about the lug, and I was wanting to say, yeah, it's so great that when Bo shows up, Ryan doesn't have to worry about thinking about what to do. He just says, "Hey, Bo, tell a story."
I know, because he has the best stories. I mean, he has a story about drawing his pistol on an NSA agent, in the middle of a server room, and like it's incredible. But when you meet Bo and Bo and you see him in person. Like Michael, I think, said the coolest thing. I want to be that cool when I'm old because he got coffee when I'm older because he got coffee and he put cream in it and he pulls out a switchblade to stir his coffee. Like this is this guy. This is just him naturally. He's just an awesome dude.
And hey, that cabin setup looked pretty doggone sweet to me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I lived where Bo was. We were literally down the street from each other for years. And we never knew it. And I met him at Self, and we were just both outside, and we just started randomly striking up a conversation. And he seemed to really know what he was talking about, but I didn't know his history. I didn't know he wrote all these books on pen testing and all that stuff. And I was like, hey, you should come on Destination Linux. And so that's kind of, and then I just started talking where he's from, and I'm like, you're literally like 2 streets down from me. What are the odds of that we live that close to each other? So it was pretty cool. Because the area he lives in is a very remote place, and I don't think a lot of people there could spell Linux, let alone use it. So it was quite fascinating.
Well, that just goes to show you, man. They're out there. But his origin stories, like his background in the Navy and the early systems, that was just fascinating to listen to when you guys had him on. So yeah. If you guys haven't, I mean, for the folks that are watching this or are still left, like if you haven't gone and listened to that DL, like it's a really cool story about his past and just being in the Navy, the early days of the internet, and sort of like how all that came about. And like
his interview episode.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like credibility, like
he
has it.
He has it in spades.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get any more OG than that.
Yeah. Awesome, dude.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great episode. I didn't have my camera or mic or anything with me, so I was just listening. So, I'm sure we'll find something to be disagreeable about. It's. Yeah.
I'm sure that's something to disagree on.
He's like, come on, we got to find something, maybe in the outtake.
Yeah. No, it was a good episode. It's funny because when you mix up the hosts like that and you get those different viewpoints, it is kind of neat to because the news is the news, right? And you guys are going to talk about it no matter what, and to have those different kind of, so you've got a security expert extraordinaire, and then you've got a distro developer or a maintainer, who's nuts and bolts, knows all that stuff. And so they add things to that conversation that.
And two guys who apparently don't know anything about Arch.
Yeah, I know. I was so disappointed, Here we are talking up Bo and all that, and they don't know nothing about Arch.
Did you see did you see the DLN discourse thread on that?
Well, the guy who joined specifically, or like the whole thread? Because I saw one message. It was like, "I'd join your Discord just to tell you don't know anything about Arch." I was like, "Okay,
right." And hey,
I didn't see this. This happened.
For real? It was like today or something. Yeah, it was posted today,
and it was a good post. I mean, he
was not wrong. He just doesn't understand what we're saying. So it's like a weird situation where it's it's miscommunication, but the response is like, I don't know, maybe it just felt more like in your face type of comment because there are just so many of them.
You mean an Arch user?
Got him.
It was kind of elitist, man.
No, it was actually, it was well thought out. So the one that I still think is hilarious is like, well, they had it on their email thread and they link to it, and it's like, that is exactly the point we're trying to make, right? Like, who reads that? No, I mean, not nobody, but it's a very select group of people. And even in there, they still don't articulate what the real benefit is. And I'm glad that guy posted what he did, because it does sort of add a little more light to it. But here's just some person, coming into the discourse forum and explaining it. And you think your beef, my beef, like everybody's beef was, why can't someone at Arch do that? Like, why is that such a
it's like,
deal?
Why does someone have to dig in? Why can't they just put it in the, the update news explaining why? Like, and also, even if they did explain why, I still don't agree that these people were saying like, that it makes sense. Like, I don't think it does make sense. Like, all it does is add more things that you could have already done.
Well, the way I was explained it yesterday was from Brian, who's a huge Arch, enthusiast, great guy, helps fund and the local user group and all of that. Great person. Sure. But he was like, hey, they switched it. He was trying to talk to me while I was working on a PC, which is a mistake because I don't listen to anything when I'm working on a PC because that's me in my zone. But what I got of it was basically that Arch was switching these things to some type of meta package, and that meta package, that was the whole purpose of this change, so that when you ran an update on, if for instance, before they made the change, you put your own kernel, you put your own, you switched out some of the elements that they would provide you by default, and you ran an update, you wouldn't get an update, or you wouldn't necessarily update those packages from base. Whereas now, because it's a meta package and you select whatever you select, the way it's designed now, it will, when you run an update everything that is outside of even what Arch provides you
Yeah, but I don't know what that means because you get an update when you update the package. So I don't understand what that means.
Update, so I wasn't sure either, but that was that explanation of it that I got from somebody. But here's the thing: this is what people don't understand is that it's not about the technical argument of whether it was a good idea or not. It's what Michael has been saying all along. Linux is terrible at marketing. It is horrible at marketing. You have really smart people, incredibly intelligent, probably some of the smartest people that I've come across in my career in computers in my entire life when I joined the Linux community, but they don't understand marketing as a whole. And Arch is one of those things where they made this decision. They didn't market it, so nobody understood it except for the elite, perhaps. And it doesn't do anything to propel Arch forward. And they will tell you, we don't care. We don't want Arch to grow. We just want it to be this elite thing. And to me, that's a shame because Arch is an incredible experience. I absolutely love it. But it's hard to get anybody on it because it's so elite.
It's not really, in that case, it's not really marketing though. It's promoting it more than anything else because they're not.
No, that doesn't make sense to me.
What's
the difference? What's the difference?
Because one is more of a commercial platform to sell a product.
No,
is the way I would look at it.
No, marketing is a generic, broad term that is promoting as a form of marketing.
It is, but when you're talking about just getting a product out there that's not necessarily something that you're looking for sale or or to acquire that way. I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it. Is like when you're talking at
it's the same thing.
Hardware. It's a fine line, I guess. But either way, it's the same. It's basically the same message. It's not being, the awareness is not there. Whether it's market promotion, however you want to term it. It's just that it's very weak in how it gets out there. But you said it yourself, Ryan, just now. It's not just Arch. It's a lot of them, the distros and these different things that don't care.
Yep. I mean, look at Destination Linux podcast and how much of a reach it has. It's insane. And how many times do we have the community come to us and say, can you please get this developer on? We would love to hear from them. Versus the developers coming to that platform to say, hey, can we get on your platform so we can talk about what we're doing? It's amazing to me because you've got 115 countries represented in one podcast, but you have to go chase people down in Linux to get them to want to promote their product. And that, to me, for some, now you'll see the regulars on DL all the time, right? And they're the ones who reach out, right? They reach out and say, hey, I got something new I did. I want to talk about it. Like they're intelligent at marketing what they're doing, but so many people are doing so many great things and they don't talk about it and nobody knows.
I'd like to think it's an oversight more than an aversion. Where like they don't even think, like it just doesn't occur to them. Like, hey, we're doing this thing, and there's two types of marketing, right? Here's a new thing we're doing that's interesting that you should know about. And the other one is we're making a change that's probably going to have some sort of impact or at least be confusing or potentially, not self-evident. So we should probably take a little bit of time and put that out there. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of silly because, I mean, it's not like you're charging them to do it. It's not like you're asking for anything more than just their time. So,
yeah. And there's so much opportunity for them to get the message out there and to market these things, and it's not difficult and it costs no money. But it reminds me of the whole Apple situation, right? Everybody thinks about Steve Jobs, and I even hear people say Steve Jobs created the iPod, Steve Jobs created the iPhone, but none of this is true, right? One of the geniuses really behind a lot of what happened with Apple was Wozniak. Had nothing to do with
no. The genius of the hardware is Wozniak for sure, right? But without them, like that's what
I'm getting to, though. That's what I'm saying is that you have to have both. There's a lot of geniuses in Linux, is what I'm saying. There's a lot of the Wozniak individuals out there that create fantastic products, but you've got to have that other person, that Steve Jobs, that gets out there in the front and brings it down to everyone's level and makes it something people desire. And that's what Steve Jobs did. But in that same thing, Steve Jobs, of course, was kind of a jerk, and he really never gave credit to anybody else but himself. So he kind of put that out there, and that's why people who are not technically inclined and don't look at the history go, "Oh, Steve Jobs created all of this." No, he didn't. But he was a smart individual, but he was smart enough to surround himself with people smarter than him.
Yes.
And he was very good at marketing and very good at getting people's attention, and that's what he did really well. And I think that's what's missing in Linux. Even the big distros with big companies, they don't have anybody who really markets tremendously well. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, marketing is something nobody thinks about because it's all the brain work. Nobody's looking at, hey, I need to get someone from the community to help me market.
That's why there's a phrase that's a long time phrase. It's, people who are successful are not necessarily smarter than you and I. It's just they surround themselves with successful people.
Also, I think the biggest thing about success is risk. And I think a lot of people don't want to take a risk. And putting yourself out there in a marketing sense is definitely a risk.
Yeah, because we you get it all the time. You got to have thick skin to deal with marketing. It is not fun.
Well, and you have to have faith in your product too.
There are people who want to see you fail. It's there was this one time on American Idol where it was really interesting. What was his name? Simon was saying, I find Americans really interesting. They love to build somebody up and put them on this pedestal, but then they
push them down.
Yeah, then they love to crush them down. And I thought that was such an interesting observation because you see that a lot, even in Linux. When a distro gets really big, when it starts getting commercial success, that's when you've got the, Ubuntu is the devil and blah, 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 blah stuff coming out because we want something to grow. We want Linux to take off. But then when somebody is successful, we want to tear them down.
I mean, in a smaller level, it's kind of happening to Manjaro now, too.
Absolutely.
Oh, they're selling out. I mean, come on, man.
Right, of course. I mean, I've had
how dare you make money?
I've had complaints with Manjaro before. But those are technical issues, not necessarily like themselves, like as a people or whatever, or a project. But like the fact that people are like, it means instantly going like they're the worst because they're selling out to the thing and stuff. It's like, come on, they're not. It's I don't know. I don't see the issue with having a business in a way that allows you to facilitate the thing that you want to do, but more consistently with sustainability. I mean,
isn't
that's
success?
Just ridiculous?
I mean,
right?
Isn't that the measure of you do something for what it was 7-8 years, right? That they've been doing this for nothing, right? I mean, yeah, they get some contributions and hopefully that's covering their infrastructure costs and material costs and stuff like that. But I mean, these guys are doing it and putting something out there that, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are using with no real expectation of anything other than just they're doing it because they enjoy doing it. And oh my goodness, they find a way that like they can make a career out of it, right? And I mean, when these guys were on Biddle, that was the one thing that I made sure I wanted them to know was that, I mean, everybody complains about, not everybody, a lot of people don't like their jobs and very few people get to do the things that they really passionately, want to do. And so these guys have taken something that they've put their heart and soul into for the better part of a decade, and they find a way to turn it into something that, is greater than just a community project. And then
they also do it with a company backing like that someone has that, like Blue Systems has to believe in them enough to do that, right? So it's just weird that they don't get, like, they're getting so much hate for something that we should be applauding them for.
Right. I mean, don't we want people to succeed?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
Imagine being a developer and you're out there in this community. You work a full-time job, you have a family, and then you come home and you read 500,000 bug reports that come in, half of them not even legitimate, and you're sitting there working. Then you got people complaining when's the next version come out. Then you got people telling you about what features they want. Then you've got all this pressure being put on you while you're working another full-time job that's probably paging you out as well in the middle of the night, and you're working and doing weekends just to get your distro ready for people. And then when you finally find a way, you've you've built this thing up from the ground up, and you have a big enough audience where you're like, hey, I can make a living off this. Then the people come in and say, how dare you? Like,
well, and let's be fair too, because it is a vocal minority. It really is. Like, I think that the majority of people, if they understand, so the fundamental goals of making sure that it's a solvent organization, that there is backing behind it, that money's going somewhere that is protected, and we'll see the longevity of the project. Those are all good things for everybody. And so the few people that somehow wearing their tinfoil hats or whatever ridiculous thing it is that's causing them to act that way, unfortunately, they're the ones that get that kind of, that they're loud, they're out there, they're persistent, and they unfortunately have a channel with all the social media and everything else to get that message out there. And it is a shame. It's unfortunate that that's how that is. But I think really when it comes down to it, the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people, are happy when these types of things happen. And all of us want to see these things succeed. I mean, I know, using just random projects that have been wonderful, well executed in small teams, there's a limit to how much they can do, and people get sick and things change. And and all of a sudden this project that you used just goes away or becomes unmaintained. And
it's happening a lot lately.
Yeah. And it's a shame to see that, because they're excellent software and it just isn't, it's not sustainable.
Again, marketing things is free instead of freedom, as Michael will say, is part of the problem. Everyone expects all of this for free, and they don't donate, they don't contribute, they just go and use and use and use. And
that goes with everything. I mean, it's just like people using web services and then being surprised that, oh, well, they're collecting all this data on me. I thought this was free. Nothing is free. Nothing. Even if it's free software, open source software, I agree with you. Like, calling it free software was, I think, a bad, maybe not the right word for it, right? It was
one of the worst possible decisions.
Yeah.
Like when I first saw this, like everybody, when the first time you ever see the term free software, you immediately think of something that it's not meaning that. And you have to, like, when I first saw it, I was like, hey, that's a weird thing. And then I saw someone say free as in beer, and I thought that was funny. But at the same time, it was still terrible marketing. Like, even if that was funny, it's still terrible marketing, because the fact that you have to explain it every single time you say it, then you have a bad decision.
Well, yeah, when I came to Linux, what was now 3 years ago, and I even have a video out there on my channel somewhere about this is how much money I saved. Because back then, not knowing any better, I thought the marketing free meant literally, hey, they do all this for free. And, I didn't really think much of it until later on, as I got to know Linux and realized that these are developers who are, working regular jobs and all this. Now I can honestly say I spend probably 10 times more on free software with donations than I did buying software in Windows. But it's more enjoyable to me to do that, to try to support developers and to give back to causes like the GNOME situation.
You also know when you give donations back to someone in a free software open source community, that they see it as like such a massive thank you, like just the gratitude they have in comparison of just buying software. It's just like commercial, like proprietary.
How many people look at free software when they hear for Linux? As if you remember right, many years ago, free software was freeware, shareware. It was stuff that might have been riddled with viruses, things like that. So it makes you wonder how many people equate it with that. I don't know if that's still true today, but it makes
I'll guarantee business for sure. Especially, I think was it Eric? Was it you that was, or Nate that was giving? Maybe it was Nate giving a story about that it was hard to get their boss to look at open source because, when they hear free, they think, okay, this can't be good either. It's going to not have support. And we're going to be stuck with a product that we move everybody over to and it goes away, or it's riddled with viruses.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and so that's the other thing about something like Manjaro, right? You legitimize a decision, and even like our discussion on Microsoft loves Linux, right? And talk about marketing. I mean, the reason that's important is that now that those companies, I mean, well, Manjaro, but I mean, now that Microsoft is, claiming this, you can go to your supervisor, the person making the decisions, and say, look, this is legit,
Absolutely.
And that's a big thing in the enterprise market, so
absolutely.
Anyway,
I mean, that is a good reason. I mean, that's a good point that I never capitalized on, but that is pretty, like, the idea that you could use the Microsoft loves Linux as a way to promote Linux is a good point, because they're much more likely to be willing to listen to that if the thing that they were going to use promotes them and stuff.
Yeah, but I'm seeing a lot of blog posts right now about I've switched back to Windows and I just use WSL now. And I feel like WSL was the anti of any of.
Oh, I agree with that completely. I agree with that completely. I'm talking about using their marketing against them kind of thing.
Right.
But at the same time, yes, WSL was like, I understand why Windows did that, or Microsoft did that. I think the WSL thing, that the fact that WSL is being promoted and worked on by Linux projects and companies, that's where I think it's just like, shooting yourself in the foot. Like, what's the point? Why are you helping them make yourself obsolete, right? Just such a weird decision.
Well, having Martin Wimpress on last night and talking about the OEM market, and that Ubuntu has more market penetration and adoption through these OEMs like Dell and Lenovo and HP and anyone shipping hardware with it pre-installed. He couldn't give hard numbers, but he said, they sell more hardware with Ubuntu pre-installed than other distros even get downloads for. Like, it's that high, like it's that big, and that year over year over year. So this idea of Linux on the desktop being, dead, or that there isn't growth, or that, Canonical specifically isn't focusing on it, is completely ridiculous, because it's a growth market and they're seeing huge returns on that. And, it legitimizes all of that because of those companies, those bigger companies doing that. So when I think of someone, any of these vendors who are working with Microsoft on WSL, I mean, that's why they're doing it. They get an avenue to the billions of Microsoft users out there. And not, okay, let's say that number is much smaller because we're talking about the enterprise segment of that. But I know from my perspective, if 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was a sysadmin, if I had access to something on Windows like WSL where I could run Linux tools natively and be able to take advantage of that, and especially those mixed environments, I mean, that is hugely powerful. And I think if distros didn't take advantage of that and get themselves into that space, that it would be honestly more detrimental than.
Let me ask you a question. What has any of the major, not just because I don't want to just pick on Canonical here, but Red Hat, Canonical, any of the big ones, what have they actually done to push desktop on Linux in the last 2 years?
2 years?
I think it's the OEM side of things. I really do think it's, that's the big one for them. I mean, the Sputnik program at Dell, I mean, we see it as being this it is in overall PC sales, it's a drop in the bucket, but the market that they focus on, so developers, right? The XPS is obviously squarely aimed
cloud
at
developers.
Yeah, any of that stuff.
Not the desktop user, right? Not the consumer.
Well, I mean, the OEM, and always every OEM I ever see is like developer, Balmer, insert Balmer meme.
Yeah.
Well,
and
because
if you look at the laptops they're selling, they're purely developer. They have no integrated GPUs.
Super expensive.
They're very expensive. They're what a business is going to buy. So again, I think when you look at, we're spending resources from these big companies, because again, I'm not trying to point one out. We're spending all these resources with things like WSL when we can't even get, AMD stuff working correctly in Linux. For a consumer, are they focused on the desktop? I don't think so. I think it's one of those things where they're focused where the money is, and that's not a bad move, right? Red Hat's focused on the cloud, Canonical's focused on the cloud and developers, but I don't think there's been no real advancements on the desktop space for your average consumer to go, yeah, that is a real focus point for them. I don't personally see it. I mean, they keep it maintained, but it's mostly to maintain the workstations in the dev environment, not.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of like, in the past 2 years, I would say it's very, very much not a focus on anybody's part.
The companies that have pushed the desktop forward has been Valve, if you think about it.
Right. I would say, I would say the Linux companies haven't really done it for the past 2 years.
The companies
Honestly,
that have pushed the desktop forward has been Valve and System 76. If I was to rate the two companies that have done the most for the desktop, those would be the two companies.
Well, Martin had a really good point about, so why aren't Linux systems in Best Buy and Fry's and all those other places? And he made a really good point that I hadn't even thought of, which is all of the upsells on a Windows computer. So not only do you have the Microsoft sort of push and stranglehold on that market, but then the salespeople themselves, whenever random person walks up and starts looking at a laptop or something, he's not just selling them that system. They're going to sell them McAfee. They're going to sell them some kind of PC warranty service.
And that to me is an excuse, because look at the Chromebook. You're not going to be able to sell any of that with the Chromebook either, and it's the hottest selling laptop out there. You're not going to sell McAfee to Chromebook user. You're not going to sell any of the up stuff to
but that's not a one-to-one. That's not
Chromebook
two.
User.
That's not two Dell laptops sitting next to each other, one with Linux or one with Ubuntu and one with Windows. And his point was basically that, and I'm not saying it's like the single greatest factor, but it is a fair point that I hadn't considered, which is if I'm selling a product and it's my job to sort of push someone in one direction or another, that Ubuntu laptop is what you get. There's not going to be any upsell on that whatsoever.
There can be.
Well, but versus...
I mean, you could have Avast as an antivirus. You could have there could be a Clam TK or Clam AV could have a commercial offering if they wanted to. There could be things like that. There could be a backup service like Carbonite or whatever being used or whatnot.
You just
like there can be
the warranties would probably more likely be the add-on service more.
I mean, the warranty is absolutely worthless anyway. But yeah,
well, and where the Chromebooks are concerned, I would be interested to see the stats on which Chromebooks are actually being purchased, because most of the Chromebooks claim to fame. Maybe I'm wrong, but my perception, and maybe I don't care enough to know that hard. I guess I should look harder at it. Is I would think that they're selling more of their lower end because of their price point versus the higher end Chromebooks. Because I think if somebody's going to spend $600 or $100 or more toward a Chromebook, they're going to probably look at a Windows PC. I would think, because they're going to think it does more.
Chromebook's doing the thing that is genius, and that is they sell so many Chromebooks because they have penetrated the school education system. So I've been in 2 different entire schools districts here in the last couple of years because I moved, and both schools requirement grade school Chromebook. So this is they and then when we walk through the halls, of the school, all of the kids, all the grades have Chromebooks at their workstations or have Chromebooks outside, and we had to buy Chromebook for our kids. That's the requirement from the school. So when they got into education by having a very inexpensive device that everybody has to have a computer today to even go to school practically, and you have a device that's well priced. I don't disagree with you that Chromebook certainly hits a market because of its price point, but we have things like Pinebooks and other things that could also go there into the education, are also inexpensive. And the only, I think, advantage from a Linux standpoint where we get into the education system really strongly is, of course, later on in college with cloud, anything related to cloud and server, but also with Raspberry Pis. That is hitting the kids and things. And what happens is these kids, they come to, eventually they'll grow up and be in the workforce. And they a lot of times they can set right? They can set the flow for what business is, what they're used to, what operating systems, how they expect things to work. And these kids are going to come out working on Chromebooks. And
but I
Chrome
also
OS.
think that Chromebooks are still a little bit more, at least right now, more of a niche market than the Windows. But I will give them credit; they do we talked about marketing before. You can't turn a channel
Chromebooks are
half the time.
massive.
You don't see advertisements
Yeah.
for the Chromebooks anymore. They're doing a great job marketing.
Yeah, they are outselling everybody by leaps and bounds. And I don't have the data in front of me, but we did read it on DL at one point. I think it was a 65% market ownership in the education space, which was previously owned by Windows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
very
like
smart.
almost completely dominated. Now Chrome is actually competing in a heavy way. So I think
And
I don't think they actually
if
have
you-
anything that can compete.
If you look at cloud, it's really interesting because you say, well, these are low end laptops. So, are they really competing? But then when you look at where Google is trying to go, I'm not saying it's going to be a huge success immediately, but Stadia is a really interesting thing because it allows you to do these advanced things because it can go outside of gaming too, that you can do in the cloud where you don't need a really fancy, expensive computer anymore to be able to do certain things. And Michael and me are huge fans of a tool called Photopea. And it's basically like an online version of a Photoshop. And it's extremely powerful. It is really close to a full Photoshop experience, like insanely close.
I'm actually doing a review on it, and so far it's basically like 75% Photoshop level. Like when people say
in the cloud,
yeah. Well, actually, technically, it's local, which is even more impressive. It's just a local, but they load it from the cloud, and it's a local thing. But like, it's such a ridiculous thing because like a long time ago, there's been like the argument between GIMP and Photoshop, and people saying that GIMP is feature parity to Photoshop. That's because they don't understand what features are. But in terms of Photopea, it is shockingly close. Like, I would be comfortable telling a professional that they could get 80% of what they want to do done.
The
biggest complaint about GIMP though is the CMYK is still. I don't know why it hasn't been integrated.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Well, the
no, I'm just saying. My son has used.
That's
Photoshop
one of the
for
horrible
years.
things about it. But that's one of the horrible things. But it's not. It's destructive, and that's the single piece that it doesn't matter anything else. The fact that it's destructive makes it worthless.
But yeah, well, see, and that's what makes like Krita actually a better choice if you're going to do that, even though it's more of a paint type program. If you're going to do certain work that you need CMYK.
Yeah, but Photopea has CMYK, has non-destructive editing, has smart objects, has layer styles. It is very close. Like, if anybody wants to do any editing whatsoever, I would say check out Photopea.
You're gonna love it. It's insane. It's really good. But we've taken over your show, Eric, and
that's okay.
That was our intent, but that wasn't our intent.
No, it's fine.
We meant to, but not completely.
This is why I like streaming, because usually I'll get folks to just stop by randomly, and that's why I thought, I'm not going to do like a like a Zoom session, but why not throw Discord in there? And actually, so I would say for future ones like this, I really like this, having the back channel and the voice. I don't mind using Rocco's, but if we wanted to do something on either the DL one or on Mumble,
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way, it'd be fine. Discord.
I mean, we kind of owe
you
you, Eric, to join in because you've helped us out like a lot.
That's true.
I did want to say, just to backtrack really quickly, so Michael introduced me to Photopea, and yeah, I've been using it. And to remove the ads, it's like $10 for 3 months. I mean, it's silly cheap. Not even 10, is it? It's even cheaper than that.
It's $10 for, I think it's $10 for 3 months. Yeah.
You can use it for free. That's to remove the ad. That's the
only thing I wish. And like, it's impressive to me and amazing that you can do all that in a web app.
Integration.
I do wish there was some desktop integration, because it's a little annoying to like save as PDF and then I have to go every single time. So
You have to download every single time a new version.
Yeah.
That is where it falls. But it does everything else so well that one fall is like, you know what? It's okay. We'll just put a Band-Aid on your knee.
I'm almost scared to advertise it in case a patent troll comes out there and is like, oh, the paintbrush icon. We have a patent for that. We need $500,000.
Right. I know. Anyway, you guys didn't take over. I talked by myself for over an hour, and I was just happy that like Adam finally joined, and then Joe and Dan. It's, you know how it is streaming by yourself. Like after a while, you start getting a little crazy. Like, am I repeating myself or? Anyway,
is anybody here? Is this thing on?
I know there are people chatting in there, but it's, you know, it gets weird. So no, I'm glad you guys stopped by. I'm at the 3 hour and 30 mark. It's a 30-minute mark.
Well,
so
you're not quite to Michael's streaming standards.
You're
but
almost. You got there.
You're getting
Close.
really close.
For me, this is my record, so I'm happy to leave it here for now. So anyway,
thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks,
I
Eric.
appreciate it. All right, everybody, have a good night. If you're watching this 3.5 hours in, God bless you, and I'll see you soon. All right, take it easy.
Yeah,